Chapter 2472. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios Lualua's new Cluet was a physical clone. Everyone, including Tianlong Divine General, was speechless at this moment. Of course, with their knowledge, they could tell that this was only the most basic form, or that this was just the beginning of the cultivation. However, the ability to create a physical clone was something that only the demon god's domain's divine lord possessed. Therefore, they were certain that this person in front of them had a close relationship with the divine lord. In this way, many things became clear. Why was this person able to give Tianhu 3 pieces of ancient resources and an ancient divine lord's ability? Perhaps, only the divine lord could have such a background. Of course, this was just a huge misunderstanding. How could Yi Xian have any relationship with the demon god's domain's divine lord? In fact, he had never even met the divine lord. If there was any relationship, it would be that Yi Xian was preparing to find Luo from the demon god's domain's divine lord. "Boss, you're finally out?" Tianhu said in surprise. Yi Xian's lips curled up slightly, but he was still slightly afraid. After all, which one of the people standing in front of him didn't emit a powerful aura? Yi Xian was very clear that any one of these people would be able to instantly take him down. However, since these people did not use their divine sense to probe him, nor did they attack him immediately, it meant that they had no ill intentions towards him. "Who are these people?" Yi Xian asked Tianhu. When Tianhu heard Yi Xian's question, he immediately began to introduce them to Yi Xian. It turned out that Tianlong Divine General and the others wanted to meet Tianhu because of the Divine Lord's ancient Divine Lord. Hence this trip. After Tianhu's introduction, Yi Xian was even more shocked. He did not expect that he would meet a divine general of the demon god's domain so soon. Of course, Yi Xian did not show any expression at this moment. He was very calm and collected. After chatting with Tianlong Divine General for a while, Tianlong Divine General and the others left. With a huge misunderstanding in front of them, the people of the Heaven Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe only had fear and no doubt towards Yi Xian. As for Yi Xian, it was naturally impossible for him to offend these people, let alone befriend them. Therefore, this meeting was rather indifferent. After the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe's people left, Tianhu excitedly said to Yi Xian, "Boss, I was fortunate enough to not disappoint you. This time, I have successfully obtained first place in the clan's grand competition." Tianhu had actually been holding back these words for a long time. In his heart, this was a mission given to him by Yi Xian, so he naturally had to do a good job. However, Yi Xian did not take it too seriously. Therefore, Yi Xian nodded and said to Tianhu, "Let's go. Let's leave this place." Since Tianlong Xinjiang and the others knew that Yi Xian was here, this place was no longer safe. Thus, Yi Xian had no choice but to leave. "Boss, where are we going? Didn't you say that you wanted to comprehend the power of the stars here? Why do you want to leave?" "I have already comprehended the power of the stars here, so there is no reason for me to continue staying here. As for where to go, it doesn't matter. I will go wherever I go." Yi Xian simply wanted to leave this place. As for where to go, he did not have a destination. If he wanted to return to the Kunlun Divine Domain, he would need to go to the 8 great divine generals' residences. Only there would be a passageway. Other things aside, if Yi Xian mentioned that he wanted to go to the Kunlun Divine Domain, it would immediately arouse suspicion. At this moment, Yi Xian could not compete with the 8 great divine generals. Thus, it would be unwise to provoke any of the 8 great divine generals. It might be possible to find Luo's whereabouts, but he had Tianhu by his side. Thus, Tianhu might be able to obtain some useful information. As the two of them walked, Yi Xian asked Tianhu, "Tianhu, do you know that there is a saint whose true form is the 9-tailed sky-loathed fox?" Tianhu looked at Yi Xian in confusion. "Boss, you know about the Saint of 9 Paths?" "Saint of 9 Paths?" Yi Xian frowned slightly. It seemed that Luo's identity in the demon god domain was not simple. "Yes, it's the saint's son of the 9 Tao. Every saint's son has his own name. For example, the other saints call me the saint's son of the heavenly dragon. However, the saint's son of the 9 Tao is very special. It's said that he's not from the demon god domain. The 9-tailed heavenly loathed fox is extremely noble. Even the divine lord has to give him some face. Moreover, the saint's son of the 9 Tao is highly valued by the divine lord." Tianhu simply told him what he knew. However, it wasn't of much use to Yi Xian. After talking for a long time, it could be summarized in one sentence. That was, Yi Xian was currently powerless to save Luo Luo. It had to be known that it was impossible for the Divine Lord of the Demon God's domain to allow Luo Luo to go into seclusion out of respect. It was probably because Luo Luo also wanted to leave the Demon God's domain to look for Yi Xian. Therefore, the Divine Master of the Demon God domain could only trap Luo Luo. When Yi Xian came to the God domain, he was separated from Luo Luo. Therefore, Luo Luo would not know that Yi Xian was in the Kunlun God domain. She would also not know about the conflict between Yi Xian and the Demon God domain. Perhaps, Luo Luo would not be mistreated in the Demon God domain. On the contrary, she would be valued because of her noble identity. After some analysis, Yi Xian knew that Luo Luo would not be mistreated. Therefore, he was not in a hurry to find Luo Luo. However, Yi Xian did not know that ever since he came to the Demon God domain, Luo Luo had been anxious. Yi Xian and Luo Luo had a special connection. Due to the uniqueness of the Demon God domain, Yi Xian's ability to sense was suppressed after he came to the Demon God domain. As a result, Yi Xian could not accurately pinpoint Luo Luo's location. However, because Yi Xian came to the Demon God domain, Luo Luo's ability to sense was strengthened. It could be said that every time Yi Xian moved, Luo Luo could clearly sense it. Luo Luo knew very well that Yi Xian came here for her. Luo Luo knew what happened to the human race in the Demon God domain. Therefore, Luo Luo was very worried about Yi Xian. Unfortunately, she could not do anything. Ever since she came to the God domain, she was brought here by a mysterious power. It could even be said that this power was so strong that even the Divine Master of the Demon God domain had to bow down to it. This was a super powerful power. At the same time, it was also a peerless elite. Luo Luo did not know who this person was. However, her every move, every word, and every action were all under this person's surveillance. Even if she was the holy son of the Demon God domain, it was just that person's arrangement. Of course, Luo Luo could feel that person's goodwill. Chapter 2473. The Yellow Sand Zone. Yi Xian and Tianhu had traversed thousands of realms just to reach a dangerous place. Tianhu stood behind Yi Xian and asked Yi Xian hesitantly, "Boss, are we really going in?" "We're already here. Do you think we should go in?" Yi Xian looked at the boundless yellow sand in front of him and said calmly. Yi Xian had deliberately chosen this place because this time, Yi Xian wanted to increase his strength in one go. At this moment, Yi Xian realized that everything he wanted to do was because he was not strong enough. Not strong enough. Therefore this time, Yi Xian wanted to increase his strength crazily. First, it was the trial in the mysterious place. Yi Xian did not even qualify to participate because he was not strong enough, so he could only be teleported out. After that, it was Luoluo's matter, and then he had to leave the Demon God's domain. In short, everything was because he was not strong enough. If he stayed outside, he would have to worry about his identity being exposed and being hunted down. Therefore, Yi Xian did not have many choices. Entering this place and quickly increasing his strength was perhaps his only choice. At this moment, the yellow sand zone that Yi Xian saw was quite famous in the Demon God's domain. This place was called the Drought Sea. The Drought Sea was huge, but even divine beasts did not dare to enter. This was because the Drought Sea not only had an extremely violent natural climate, but it was also inhabited by the ancient beasts. It was said that the Drought Sea was formed because of a huge explosion. In ancient times, the Drought Sea was a very famous battlefield in the Great War between the gods. Thousands of powerful ancient supremes fought here. They tore through the void and trampled over mountains and rivers. However, for some reason they broke through a mystic realm. It was a completely isolated mystery world. A mystery world that belonged to the ancient beasts. The remaining strong cultivators were crazily hunted down by the ancient beasts and died one by one. After the mystery world exploded, everything inside the mystery world was scattered here. The yellow sand area was only the outermost area of the Drought Sea. As for the inside, it was even more terrifying. According to Tianhu, even the Divine Master had come here personally. However, he had left in less than 10 days with a fearful expression. This was because there was an extremely powerful existence in the Drought Sea. An existence that even the Demon God's God domain's Divine Master couldn't deal with. Fortunately, The drought sea hadn't moved in the slightest for millions of years. It was as if this was an independent place that wasn't affected by anything in the outside world. In fact, some experts from the demon god realm would also form teams and enter to search for treasures. After all, there were many special resources in the drought sea. Moreover, those ancient beasts were also extremely valuable. Ancient beasts didn't have transfiguration divine abilities, nor did they have high intelligence. Furthermore, all of them focused on cultivating their physical bodies. Tianhu had said that the reason why he was able to fuse his Dharma power was because his father, Tianlong Shenjiang, had come here when he was young and had a fortuitous encounter. Then, he combined it with his own understanding and created the cultivation method of Dharma power fusion. That was why Yi Xian had chosen this location. He had chosen the drought sea. Since the ancient beasts were so mysterious, Yi Xian would surely be able to obtain an opportunity to improve his strength quickly. Fear. Perhaps others would be afraid, but not Yi Xian. To Yi Xian, there was nothing to be afraid of. The drought sea was home to powerful ancient beasts. To Yi Xian, this was the best place to cultivate. After all, Yi Xian needed to devour ancient beasts to improve quickly. Yi Xian didn't want to wait any longer. He had waited for too long. It was time to explode. There were still many things for Yi Xian to do. He couldn't waste too much time in the demon god's god domain. If you don't want to go in, then wait for me outside. I'll find you when I come out. Yi Xian indifferently said to Tianhu. After that, he no longer paid any attention to Tianhu and directly walked forward. Actually, it was a good thing that Yi Xian didn't bring Tianhu with him. After all, if Tianhu went in with him, some of Yi Xian's secrets would be exposed. At least for now, Tianhu didn't have the right to know Yi Xian's secrets. Tianhu hesitated for a moment. By the time he wanted to chase after him, it was already too late. Yi Xian had already disappeared. Therefore, he could only stay where he was and cultivate while waiting for Yi Xian to return. After entering the yellow sand zone, there was nothing special in the beginning. Here, there was only an isolation zone that stretched as far as the eye could see. Regardless of whether it was the stone god beast or ancient beast, they would rarely come here. However, it was also because of this that there were humans here. Yi Xian kept his divine will extended outwards. Therefore, it didn't take long for him to find a small human tribe. This was a tribe built around an oasis. There were only a few hundred people here, but it was very peaceful. Yi Xian didn't hesitate and walked over. The people here had very low cultivation levels. They made some simple Dharma treasures to protect their homes. At the same time, they hunted some weak ancient beasts or divine beasts to cultivate. At this moment, they suddenly saw Yi Xian in the yellow sand, which immediately attracted the attention of the people here. "Father, father, there's someone in the desert," a youth shouted loudly. After a moment, a burly man rushed over. He was holding a large knife made of an unknown material in his hand. There were a few people behind him. "Go in, everyone go in quickly. There's an array in the house. Activate the array immediately if something's wrong," the burly man shouted loudly. Soon, all the people around the oasis hid in the only big stone house in the oasis. Yi Xian knew what these people were worried about. Therefore, he didn't mind and continued walking over. "Stop right there. Who are you?" "I'm Yi Xian. I'm just passing by and would like to rest here for a while." After all, he was a human. It wasn't easy to meet a free human in the demon god's domain. Yi Xian wouldn't find trouble with these people. You're a human?" The burly man hesitated for a moment. After recognizing Yi Xian, he asked hesitantly. "Yes, I'm a human." Yi Xian didn't hide anything and answered directly. "You're a human? Haha, quick, invite him in." When they heard that he was a fellow human, the people didn't stop Yi Xian. Instead, they quickly invited Yi Xian in. "Haha, brother, don't blame them. You know that people like us who live in this desert will be eaten by divine beasts or ancient beasts one day if we don't keep our guard up. May I ask which tribe you're from, brother?" "I'm not from here. I'm from outside. This time, I'm here to investigate." "What? You want to go in?" "Brother, you're too bold. Although the lives of humans are as cheap as grass here, you don't have to humiliate yourself like this. You're just going to die if you go in." Chapter 2474. God slaying set. Seeing that Yi Xian was silent, The burly man hesitated for a moment before handing a green card to Yi Xian. Brother, take this. Perhaps it will be of use to you. Yi Xian picked up the card. It was also made of an unknown material, but there was an ancient word, Bing, sealed on it. What is this? Yi Xian asked curiously. We don't know what this is either. We accidentally obtained this from an ancient beast during a hunt. Although we don't know what it is, we do know that as long as you use your divine sense to activate it, it will create the phantom of an ancient beast that will protect you. Card. Phantom of an ancient beast? Yi Xian was slightly taken aback. It seemed that the drought sea held its own secrets. I don't need this. After all, this thing will be of great use to you. The burly man hesitated for a moment. This thing was of great use to them. It could be said that they had relied on this thing to hunt ancient beasts several times. It was also because of this thing that they had been able to fend off the attacks of divine beasts several times. The burly man frowned. The humans who lived in the drought sea had a tradition. Once they met a fellow tribesman in need, they would help them with all their might. After all, it was already very difficult to survive in this place. If they did not help each other, the human race would have been wiped out long ago. Seeing that Yi Xian had rejected him, the burly man felt a little guilty. After hesitating for a moment, the burly man's eyes suddenly lit up. He took out a round plate. Brother, since you don't want the card, I'll give this to you. To be honest, we've only activated this thing once when we obtained it. That time, we summoned a dozen powerful ancient beasts. Unfortunately, for some reason, we couldn't use it again. So, although this thing is powerful, I can't tell you how to use it. Take it first. Who knows, it might be of some help to you on the way. Yi Xian did not understand the tradition of helping each other in the drought sea, but he knew how to repay kindness. Yi Xian would not be stingy if these people could help him without holding back in their first meeting. All right, I'll take this. These pills are for you. Share them with your tribesmen. They will be good for your tribesmen. The burly man did not know that the pills that Yi Xian was giving him were cultivation pills that were hard to come by outside. Therefore, he accepted them without hesitation. After leaving the tribe, Yi Xian took out the strange round plate as he walked. What is this thing? Yi Xian was confused. The round plate's design was simple. If the burly man's introduction, Yi Xian would have thought it was just a dish. To be sure, it was not as simple as it was. System, detect this thing. Yi Xian. Unable to detect. Insufficient resources. Could it be that the system was talking about faith points? System, let's exchange resources for faith points detection. Ding. System notification. Insufficient resources. Unable to exchange for sufficient faith. Yi Xian stopped in his tracks. What does this mean? Even with all of his resources combined, it was still not enough to detect such a thing? What is this thing? Is it so strange? Yi Xian did not believe that he could not do anything to this thing. System, open that gift pack for me. Yi Xian had completed the star power mission and received a gift pack and a 9-star pearl stone. But he had not used it yet. At this moment, Yi Xian wanted to use a gift pack for a plate. Ding! System notification. The special gift pack has been successfully opened. Congratulations to the host for receiving a gift pack of points, a gift pack of magic treasures, and an unknown gift pack. What's going on? He opened a gift pack and then opened 3 gift packs? After Yi Xian was stunned, he was pleasantly surprised. Yi Xian didn't need to wash his hair to know about the gift pack. He would either give him devour points, eternal points, or faith points. But no matter what was given, one thing was certain, they were all good things. System, open the gift pack of points first. Yi Xian wanted to see what he could get. It would be best if he could get eternal points. Although it had been a long time since he obtained devour points, eternal points seemed to be more useful. Ding! System notification. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 1 million faith points, 100 eternal points, and 10 devour points. Yi Xian was dumbfounded. He even felt that happiness came too suddenly. 1 million faith points was not much, but the key was eternal points. A full 100 eternal points. This was simply something Yi Xian did not dare to imagine. What did 100 faith points mean? Even if he used eternal domain, he could use it 20 times. This time, Just opening the gift pack once gave Yi Xian such a great prize. How could Yi Xian not be excited? 10 Devour points. It was unknown whether it was because of the increase in realm or because Yi Xian had been unlucky during this period. But Yi Xian had not encountered a devourer for a long time, let alone obtain devour points. But at this moment, he obtained 10 devour points in one go. Combined with suitable resources, wouldn't Yi Xian be able to have a big change this time? Even Yi Xian could not stay calm at this moment. The reward of this gift pack was too generous. Suppressing the excitement in his heart, Yi Xian continued to say to the system, "System, open the gift pack of magic treasures." The gift pack of magic treasures could obviously be opened. Then, if the gift pack of points gave Yi Xian such a big surprise, what kind of surprise would the gift pack of magic treasures give Yi Xian? Ding! System notification. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a special scroll. Set Perfection Scroll. The Set Perfection Scroll can choose suitable resources according to the host's wishes, and directly perfect a set of 2 or more parts that the host owns. Shock, ecstasy. Yi Xian did not know how to describe his feelings at this moment. Although this was only a scroll, its value was immeasurable. Yi Xian now had the Godslayer sword and the Godslayer armor. Didn't this mean that Yi Xian could use this Set Perfection Scroll to complete the Godslayer set in one go? Although the resources were provided by Yi Xian himself, one had to know that compared to resources, it was much more difficult to create a set of magic treasures like the Godslayer set. In an instant, Yi Xian's hands, which were holding the scroll, trembled slightly. Unfortunately, when Yi Xian saw the materials used to create the Godslayer set, his expression turned ugly. Chapter 2475. The system was so shocked that it upgraded. Where was Yi Xian supposed to find such a thing? This was the God Emperor realm. What was the God Emperor realm? That was referring to Mi Ming, a God Master realm expert. The system actually wanted Yi Xian to find a God Master's Godhead, and 5 of them at that. Yi Xian had been in the God realm for so long, but he had only met 2 God Masters. One was the God Master of the Kunlun God domain, Mi Ming, and the other was the God Master of the Yao God domain. But creating a God-slaying set required 5 God Masters' Godheads, and complete ones at that. At this moment, Yi Xian put away the scroll without hesitation. Because he knew that with his current strength, he couldn't gather all the materials. Of course it was not possible now, but it did not mean that it would not be possible in the future. There was only one last gift bag left. As for this last gift bag, it was probably the most special gift bag. What kind of surprise could it bring to Yi Xian? System, open the unknown gift bag. Yi Xian said calmly, but his mind was completely focused. Ding, system notification. Ding, warning, warning, the host has received a super strong reward. The system is undergoing an emergency upgrade. Ding, warning, warning, the host, please take note, the system will be forcibly shut down for 3 months. Yi Xian had a dumbstruck expression on his face. What did he open up that directly upgraded the system? And it was an emergency upgrade. Yi Xian subconsciously shouted at the system several times, but there was no response. In other words, the system had really been upgraded. But Yi Xian didn't even know what he had done. Didn't he just open an unknown gift bag? Was there a need to make such a big fuss? Fortunately, it was only 3 months, so it wasn't unacceptable. This is great. This plate can't be used to find out what it's for. Forget it. I'll just leave it for now. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. This situation was completely out of his expectations. It was also something that Yi Xian had never encountered before. During these 3 months, Yi Xian did not intend to stir up any trouble. After all, without the system, Yi Xian's strength would still decrease. Most importantly, even if he killed an ancient beast or a mythical beast, he would not gain any experience points. In that case, killing them would be a waste of time. However, it was still necessary to hurry. Yi Xian was not prepared to look for trouble, but that did not mean that trouble would not look for Yi Xian. On this day, Yi Xian walked through the yellow sand as usual. Even though the yellow sand region was only the outermost region of the Drought Sea, it was still very dangerous. However, the Drought Sea was extremely vast. According to Tian Hu, the Drought Sea occupied a fifth of the entire demon god domain. Such a large area, even if it was only his outer region, was not a place that could be traversed quickly. After all, they didn't even have a map here. Moreover, they would get lost from time to time. Whether it was divine telekinesis or eyes, they were useless in the yellow sand. The yellow sand had a strange restriction that was enough to cause anyone who entered to lose their sense of direction immediately. It was said that someone had been trapped in the yellow sand for 10,000 years. Furthermore, that person was lucky enough to not encounter any disasters in the yellow sand and thus survived. However, this time, Yi Xian didn't have such good luck. He encountered the most ordinary disaster in the yellow sand area. A law storm. Due to the special geographical location of the yellow sand, there were relatively few law powers in the yellow sand. However, there were a few law powers that were excessively abundant. Among them was the law of the wind. It could be said that the yellow sand was constantly windy at all times. However, it was not affected at all during normal times. After all, even the simplest protective divine power was enough to counteract these violent winds. However, it would be a tragedy if they encountered a law storm. A law storm was a natural phenomenon that occurred when the law of the wind was too concentrated in a certain area. Through the form of a storm, the law of the wind was eliminated. Even the law powers could be eliminated. One could only imagine how terrifying the power was. The formation of a law storm did not have the slightest sign. At this moment, Yi Xian was walking as usual. However, the moment he took a step forward, there was a sudden change in heaven and earth. A violent and terrifying aura overturned heaven and earth in an instant. Yi Xian did not have the slightest ability to resist and was directly lifted into the air. When he stabilized himself and looked over, it was already indistinguishable from heaven and earth. At this moment, Yi Xian seemed to have been brought into an unknown space. Above his head, below his feet, around his body, it was as if it was the sky and the earth. It was extremely strange. Boom! A divine dragon condensed from the law directly crashed toward Yi Xian. This was a pure law life form, and it was formed in an instant. However, before Yi Xian could react, the law divine dragon disintegrated in an instant. A law storm was not a real storm. The reason it was called a storm was because it had one thing in common with storms. They both had the eye of the storm. Fortunately, Yi Xian was now in the eye of the storm. Unfortunately, Yi Xian could not move an inch at this moment. He could only watch the terrifying changes in the outside world. Law life forms quickly appeared one after another. Law divine dragons, law divine tigers, and even law Kuan-Pungs appeared. However, these law life forms did not last long from their appearance to their disappearance. This was because they were all wind law life forms. The main reason for the appearance of a law storm was because there were too many wind laws to repair. At this moment, Yi Xian was witnessing a miracle with his own eyes. A miracle that no one else would ever see in their lifetime. In the blink of an eye, the birth and death of a law life form was completed in an instant. And their appearance was not known to anyone other than Yi Xian. Perhaps, Yi Xian's eyes were their only witness. Because Yi Xian, they had existed. At this moment, Yi Xian could not release his divine sense. Yi Xian tried, but just as he released a trace of his divine sense, it was immediately swept away by the law storm. Therefore, Yi Xian's eyes were the only witness. Witnessing all of this, these law life forms did not seem to know what they were experiencing. It was as if their lives were only meant to bloom for a moment. The law storm condensed the excess wind laws into wind law life forms, and then quickly destroyed them. Through this method, the excess nomological power was eliminated. However, this process was extremely natural. After all, this was the result of a natural balance, and it was in accordance with the laws of the Great Tao. Only Yi Xian, a witness, felt sorry for these law life forms. Yi Xian was a witness. He could see with his own eyes how these strange law life forms were born and how they died. Chapter 2476. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios' relics of the ancient god planet could be said that if they were not in this nomological storm and were in the outside world instead, they would be invincible. However, the crux of the matter was that they only obtained this power in an instant. Of course, their lives were only in an instant. Perhaps in their world, the power of time law was also involved and sped up their time immensely. Yi Xian watched all this in silence. He could do nothing about it. Other than being a witness, Yi Xian could not do anything else. It could be said that if Yi Xian had not happened to be standing in the eye of the storm, he would have disappeared long ago. The nomological storm did not last long. When no nomological life forms appeared in the storm, The world finally started to return to normal. At the same time, the storm seemed to turn into an ordinary storm and then disappeared. Perhaps what they saw outside the nomological storm was just a very ordinary storm. For some reason, Yi Xian thought of this sentence in his heart. A flower, a blade of grass, a world, a year, a life. At this moment, Yi Xian seemed to realize many things. It could be said that he had witnessed everything in a single world. The life forms in the nomological storm might only think that this was their entire world. As for Yi Xian, who had been standing there silently watching them, what was he in the eyes of these nomological life forms? God. As for their own strength, which one of them didn't surpass Yi Xian? Stronger than most ordinary gods? Strength reigned supreme? However, in the nomological storm, that did not seem to be the case. Just because Yi Xian was not on the same plane as these nomological life forms, there was a huge difference. Yes, it was a plane. The power of the plane's nomological laws. Unknowingly, Yi Xian stood in place in a daze. The yellow sand was at a loss. Layer by layer, Yi Xian was completely covered in yellow sand in a few days. Another few days later, this place was completely flat. As for Yi Xian, he was nowhere to be seen because he had been buried by the yellow sand. At this moment, Yi Xian had already fallen into deep thought. He pondered the power of the plane and the power of the planar laws. A faint shadow appeared above Yi Xian's godhead. It could be said to be a single shadow, but it could also be said to be countless shadows. It was the power of the planar laws. Yi Xian was enlightened. He had successfully comprehended the power of the planar laws. Furthermore, it was the true essence of the planar laws. Unfortunately, Yi Xian was too weak, and his understanding was too shallow. Therefore, he could not activate the power of the planar laws. No one had ever comprehended the planar laws. At the very least, no one in the current god realm had ever done so. But this time, Yi Xian had used the power of the law storm to comprehend a sliver of the planar laws. Even if it was only a trace, it was still a seed. As long as it was a seed, it could sprout. In the future, whether or not Yi Xian could cultivate the planar laws would depend on himself. One had to know that the enlightenment this time was completely separate from the system. In other words, the power of the planar laws was completely the power of Yi Xian himself. It was a power that was not controlled by the system, nor was it supervised by the system. Of course, at the same time, he would not receive any help from the system. 3 months later, a sound rang out. Ding! System upgrade successful. With this notification, Yi Xian finally woke up. The system had finally recovered. Yi Xian was overjoyed. He hurriedly asked the system, "System, why did you suddenly upgrade this time?" Yi Xian had to get to the bottom of this question. After all, this had never happened before. Ding! System notification. Attention! Host. The host has unlocked the Divinity Stripper Subprofession reward in advance. The system has been fully updated. The system actually did not answer Yi Xian's question. It only told Yi Xian about the reward. Forget it. The system often does this anyway. It's probably because I'm not strong enough. Yi Xian did not think too much about it. He was too lazy to ask. Divinity Stripper. When he heard this reward, Yi Xian was practically beside himself with joy. Back then, Yi Xian had obtained a complete divinity. At that time, Yi Xian knew that the Divinity Stripper had completely lost its inheritance. Perhaps, Yi Xian was the only Divinity Stripper left in the world. He just did not know if there were 1 or 2 Divinity Strippers in those special secret realms. The Divinity Stripper had the special ability to strip divinity. Against enemies who did not have a high mastery of the laws, the Divinity Stripper could be forcibly stripped without harming their lives. Against enemies of similar strength, the Divinity Stripper could be extracted after defeating them. There was a chance to strip a complete Divinity Stripper, or obtain a Divinity Fragment. Against disciples who were stronger than the Divinity Stripper, the Divinity Stripper could be used to attack the opponent's Divinity Stripper. It could be said that the Divinity Stripper was a very powerful profession. Not only was its combat strength strong, but its attacking methods were also very strange. It was hard to defend against. Yi Xian did not hesitate and immediately chose to learn it. This time, Yi Xian did not bother to ask what the system had upgraded this time. What Yi Xian wanted to know the most now was what the disc was. System, can I use eternal points to detect this disc? Ding. System notification. The host is using eternal points to detect. This time, it will cost 10 eternal points. Does the host confirm? So expensive. Confirm. Ding. Congratulations to the host. You have obtained the special item, Ancient God Race's Divine Card Roulette. Ancient God Race. Yi Xian had heard of this race before. It was said that it was a powerful race in ancient times. However, it had gone extinct long ago. As for what legends they left behind, he did not know. Could it be that this ancient beast was related to the ancient god race? Otherwise, why would he find something of the ancient god race here? Well, now he knew what this thing was. Unfortunately, Yi Xian could not use this thing because Yi Xian did not know what this thing was for. Divine Card Roulette? Yi Xian did not even know what a divine card was, let alone a divine card roulette. It could be said that Yi Xian had already completely fallen into a daze. Each and every one of them had just entered the Drought Sea, yet they'd already encountered a few strange things. He really did not know what else he would encounter along the way. Of course, if there were more rewards like the divinity stripper subprofession, Yi Xian would not mind at all. At this time, Yi Xian put away his feelings and walked forward again. Yi Xian did not know what was waiting for Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian was sure that this time, it would be extraordinary. The mysterious Drought Sea, the mysterious ancient beast, what kind of experience would Yi Xian bring? Step by step, Yi Xian kept moving forward. After the system upgrade, Yi Xian would no longer be trapped in the yellow sand area. Therefore, it did not take long for Yi Xian to walk out of the yellow sand area. However, what appeared in front of Yi Xian was a black area of withered rocks. Black. A boundless black. All of them were stones, stones of all kinds of strange shapes. Chapter 2477. Limerick, Woo Woo Woo. The wind carried the sound of weeping. This was the sound of the wind, but it also sounded like sobbing. There were old people, children, men, and women crying. It was clearly just the sound of the wind, but there were all kinds of sounds. This showed that this was not an ordinary place. Yi Xian ignored all of this and continued to walk forward. Before long, Yi Xian saw a tea house in front of him. A divine beast with spikes all over its body and an incomplete form was holding a teapot and serving tea to a customer. The tea was fragrant, but it also carried the smell of blood. It was already extraordinary that such a tea house would appear in such a strange place. However, Yi Xian still walked towards the tea house. "Sir, what would you like to drink?" The divine beast carried the teapot to Yi Xian's side and asked Yi Xian. If it weren't for the special environment here, his words and actions would be no different from a waiter in an ordinary tea house. But if it was a trap, such an obvious trap was a little illogical. So at this moment, Yi Xian's heart was filled with countless doubts, but he did not ask. "A pot of tea." Yi Xian looked at the divine beast and said casually. The divine beast did not say anything else, but turned and left. Before long, it returned with a pot of tea. "Sir, this is your return tea. After drinking this pot of return tea, you can turn around and go back." Yi Xian was slightly taken aback. This divine beast was actually asking him to leave? What if I still want to go in? How you choose is your own decision. I am powerless to stop you. But if you really must go, then drink all the tea, not leaving a single drop behind. Leave a soul, leave a soul, leave a trace of the soul is not destroyed, the spirit remains, the cycle of thousands of years. The road ahead is difficult, difficult, the road ahead cannot be held back, cannot be held back. The divine beast was actually reciting a limerick. Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not understand what it meant. It was only when Yi Xian saw the customers around him that he understood. System, detect this waiter. Ding. System notification. The target is a trace of the soul, not a living thing. So it was. This was a soul retention tea house. The meaning of leaving a soul was very simple. It was to keep the soul. Some forces had special abilities. Through special abilities and special magic treasures, when a person wanted to do something they were not confident in, they would use special means to leave behind a strand of their soul. The advantage of this was that if he really did die, then as long as there was a trace of his soul, there would be a chance for him to be revived. This sort of method could not be considered as a commonly used method. After all, on the path of cultivation, it could be said that one could die at any moment. However, Some important figures of the factions were used to leave a soul retention tea house. At the most crucial moment, through this soul, it was equivalent to having a second life. Here, there was a soul retention tea house. He didn't know who opened it, and why it was opened here. Looking at the customers who were silently drinking tea, it was likely that they had repeated this action countless times. This was because they were only a strand of remnant soul. Without the help of external forces, it was impossible for them to rely on a strand of remnant soul to be revived. Who was it that built such a place? What was the purpose of her building this place? This was the Drought Sea, the habitat of the ancient beasts. Could it be that all the divine beast masters of the demon god domain had built this place because they wanted to exterminate the ancient beasts in the Drought Sea? Maybe it was possible, but what about the yellow sand zone? And what about the waiter? Why couldn't he stay? Listening to his tone, it seemed like he wanted to keep something. Was it to keep someone like Yi Xian, who was trying to enter the Drought Sea? Yi Xian did not know. He had no place to find out. At this moment, Yi Xian had thousands of questions, but he could only keep them to himself. No one could answer for him. This teapot was a treasure because the tea inside could condense on its own. However, Yi Xian did not take it away. Leaving it here might be the right place for this teapot. Yi Xian did not drink the soul retention tea house. He continued on his way. After leaving the soul retention tea house, Yi Xian knew that he had set foot on the path of the ancients. Perhaps someone had walked this path before and hunted ancient beasts through this place. He walked for a full 7 days. Yi Xian had thought of flying through the air to increase his speed. Unfortunately, the idea was beautiful, but reality was cruel. The sky was a path that could not be taken. Perhaps it was because this place was close to the yellow sand zone, or because there was a serious overabundance of laws here, but in any case, there would be nomological beings floating through the sky from time to time. They were extremely fast, disappearing in a flash. If it were anyone else, they might think that these nomological beings were just passing by. However, Yi Xian, who had experienced the nomological storm, knew that this was the entire course of their lives. There was a strange energy in the sky. It was a nomological power that Yi Xian had never seen before, nor could he sense. The sky was extremely empty. Just from this, Yi Xian could tell that the sky was more dangerous than the ground. That was why Yi Xian did not choose to fly through the sky. At this moment, Yi Xian was no longer in a monotonous black. Instead, he could see buildings. Seeing buildings meant that danger was approaching. Because this was undoubtedly equivalent to entering the Drought Sea. And these buildings were undoubtedly built by ancient beasts. The architectural style of ancient beasts was different from that of the divine tribe of the Kunlun divine domain and the beast tribe of the demon god divine domain. These buildings were filled with a sense of ancientness. Each building was not only huge, but also very rough. At this moment, in front of Yi Xian did not know what these buildings were used for because they did not have any signs. These buildings seemed to be made from the skin and bones of some giant beast. Ancient beasts did not have much intelligence. To be able to achieve such a level was already commendable. Moreover, these buildings did not have the slightest aura of an array. In other words, these buildings were unguarded. Yi Xian observed the buildings from afar. Logically speaking, if there were people in the buildings, they should have discovered Yi Xian long ago. However, Yi Xian had not been discovered until now. There was only one possibility. This was an abandoned building. Yi Xian slowly walked forward, towards the buildings. Not long after, he arrived at the door. Indeed, it was wild enough. Perhaps only ancient beasts would have this kind of architectural style. The walls were made of animal skin, but the ancient beasts had drawn strange patterns on them. Chapter 2478. Translator, Nyoibo Studio Editor. Nyoibo Studio. Against the ancient beasts. Yi Xian walked through the hall, feeling the ancient aura. There was no divine power here, no power of laws. There was only the purest and most primitive aura. Yi Xian looked like he was admiring a work of art. Sometimes, however, danger would strike when you least expect it. At this moment, Yi Xian wasn't on guard, and this attack was abnormally sudden. Boom! Suddenly, a huge force came crashing down on him. It was a pure and primitive power, but because it was so strong, it triggered the cooperation of some of the laws. The ancient beast clan. Yi Xian retreated quickly. A huge crater had been left where he had been standing. A figure appeared. Of course, it was not a person. but a strange ancient beast. "Who are you?" The person's voice was very stiff. It was obvious that he did not speak often. Moreover, his words were toneless. Didn't they say that ancient beasts did not have any intelligence? Didn't they say that the ancient beast clan was a barbaric existence? Why could this ancient beast speak human language? Yi Xian was puzzled. He immediately said to the system, "System, detect this guy. I want to see if he is an ancient beast." Ding. System notification. Detection successful. Target specified. Ancient beast clan member. Special ability. Physical enhancement. Ancient beast transformation. So this was not his original form. It seemed that this ancient beast had made some progress after interacting with the divine beasts of the demon god domain for so many years. Moreover, it was obvious that the divine beasts of the demon god domain had given up on managing this place. But the ancient beasts had sent their clansmen out to secretly learn. Who said that the ancient beasts were barbaric and ignorant? In Yi Xian's opinion, the ancient beast clan was not as barbaric as he had thought. They even had the transfiguration divine power, although they had only learned a little. He did not know whether the entire ancient beast clan was like this, or whether Yi Xian had encountered a special case. Before Yi Xian could reply, he heard the ancient beast say, "Those who enter will die." After saying that, the ancient beast suddenly ran towards Yi Xian. He clearly wasn't using any divine power or law power, but when this guy ran, he wasn't much slower than Yi Xian. Dang! Boom! The ancient beast abruptly threw a punch, and a power that could topple mountains and overturn seas was instantly unleashed. With his attack as the epicenter, everything within a radius of 10,000 kilometers was instantly reduced to nothingness. At this moment, even Yi Xian had to admit that this ancient beast had its own special abilities when it came to body refinement. One had to know that even Yi Xian, with the support of the system, would not be able to cause such a huge amount of damage even if he unleashed his full strength. This ancient beast's strength was so great that it actually resonated with the laws. Generally speaking, after people comprehended the laws, they would take the initiative to guide the power of the laws for their own use, turning it into a means of attack. However, the ancient beasts were not like that. Their attacks were actually based on the strength of their physical bodies. They directly drove the laws and made the laws cooperate with their actions. It could be said that in terms of the utilization of the laws, this ancient beast's actions were very wasteful. However, to drive the laws with one's physical body was already considered a miracle. At this moment, Yi Xian was still in the mood to observe the ancient beast's battle style. However, when the ancient beast attacked again, Yi Xian was no longer in the mood to observe. "Get out, outsider." At this moment, the ancient beast was speaking in human language while transforming into its true form. When the ancient beast's true form was revealed, Yi Xian finally realized how huge it was. It was more than 10 meters tall, and its entire body was filled with firm muscles. The ancient beast casually pulled out a bone from the side and used it as a weapon. Boom! Boom! 2 consecutive frenzied attacks forced Yi Xian to continuously retreat. The entire ground was destroyed by the ancient beast's frenzied attacks, as if a violent earthquake had occurred. Every time he attacked, a ray of light would naturally condense on the beast bone. It was the power of the laws that had been restrained. It was extremely fast and powerful. "Wei Zhantian, kill it for me." Finally, Yi Xian had seen enough of the ancient beast's performance and finally made his move. 2 God-Slayer swords appeared in an instant and attacked the ancient beast directly. However, what happened next left Yi Xian in disbelief. The 2 God-slaying swords hit the ancient beast without any resistance. However, the invincible God-slaying swords did not kill the ancient beast. Instead, with a bang, the 2 God-slaying swords were sent flying away. How was this possible? This was the first time Yi Xian had encountered such a situation. It was simply too shocking for Yi Xian. "Damn it, I don't believe that I can't do anything to you. Wei Zhantian, continue attacking." Yi Xian suddenly took out his Rule Divine Bow. As he ordered Wei Zhantian to continue controlling the 2 God-Slayer swords to attack, he also pulled on the Rule Divine Bow. Augment of Gravity Law. Yi Xian used the gravity law once. Wasn't the ancient beast's physical body strong? Then, let's see if it could withstand the gravity law's attack. Boom! The first gravity law divine arrow hit the ancient beast directly. Unfortunately, it only made the ancient beast take a few steps back. The second gravity divine arrow was even worse. It was sent flying by the ancient beast's bone club. Such strength! Yi Xian was convinced. The ancient beast's strength was simply shocking. Even a divine arrow supported by the law of gravity could be sent flying. Just how strong was this guy? However, would Yi Xian give up just like that? Obviously it was impossible. Augment of devouring law. This time, Yi Xian shot 3 divine arrows at the same time. All 3 divine arrows were augmented with the power of the devouring law. Trying to use physical strength to resist the power of the laws? How could it be that simple? Boom! The ancient beast used the bone club in its hand to smash one of the divine arrows. It thought that it would be sent flying like the previous time. Unfortunately, this time, the divine arrow was smashed into a huge vortex. The violent devouring law was instantly activated. The ancient beast lost its grip on the bone club in its hand and was sucked away by the vortex. It was directly devoured. However, the ancient beast's body did not suffer too much damage. It could not even pull him away. Fortunately, at this time, the other 2 rule divine arrows had flown over. In an instant, 2 more vortexes appeared beside the ancient beast. If it were anyone else facing the attack of 3 rule vortexes, they would have either fled or been killed. Even if they were lucky enough to survive, they would not have it any easier than the ancient beast. Chapter 2479. Translator, Nyoibo Studio Editor. Nyoibo Studio Map Fragment. Did this guy have to be so strong? Yi Xian frowned. With a wave of his hand, he released a divine ability. Absolute Zero. In an instant, the ancient beast was frozen to the spot. Kill him for me. With Yi Xian's order, he released the divine wood sword attendants. The divine wood sword servants attacked the ancient beast with the 2 god-slaying swords. Unfortunately, the more Yi Xian watched, the tighter his frown became. Because no matter whether it was the divine wood sword servants or the attacks of the 2 god-slaying swords, to that guy, they simply could not cause any decent damage. It was as if the god-slaying swords had become a blunt, worn knife in front of the ancient beast. Yi Xian's frown deepened, but he was thinking quickly. Suddenly, he thought of a feasible plan. The ancient beast's body was so strong that even the god-slaying swords could not do anything to it. What about their divine consciousness? Yi Xian wanted to try. Yi Xian did not believe that the ancient beast was not afraid of divine consciousness attacks. A solid divine consciousness sword suddenly formed. Following Yi Xian's thought, the divine consciousness sword attacked the ancient beast. Silent and undetectable. Spiritual force attacks were silent in the first place. As for the ancient beast, it also stopped moving at this moment. This guy with such a strong body did not cultivate divine consciousness at all. Therefore, Yi Xian killed him with just 1 divine consciousness attack. Ding! System notification. Congratulations to the host for killing a border soldier of the Ancient Beast clan. You have obtained a map fragment of the Drought Sea. A map. This was a good thing. No matter where one went, a map was undoubtedly the most useful thing. However, the ancient beast that Yi Xian had killed with great difficulty was just a border soldier. At this moment, Yi Xian did not hold much hope for this trip to the Drought Sea. A border soldier had almost rendered Yi Xian helpless. If he encountered a general or something like that, wouldn't Yi Xian be invincible? With a wave of his hand, Yi Xian swallowed the ancient beast's corpse. This time, Yi Xian's main purpose in entering the Drought Sea was to increase his cultivation level. Naturally, he would not be the same as before. Occasionally, he would hoard resources and wait for the right time to devour them. This time, Yi Xian would devour all of the enemies he killed on the spot. The map fragment could not show the entire Drought Sea. Furthermore, it could not show Yi Xian's location. Hence, Yi Xian could only keep the map for now. After killing the ancient beast's corpse, Yi Xian. As they entered Corp CC, the ancient beast's Ancient Beast clan. Unlike what Yi Xian thought, this place was not only inhabited by ancient beasts. In fact, there were many other clans living here. These clans were exceptionally strong. Perhaps they were influenced by the ancient beasts, or perhaps it was because of the environment here. But in any case, the other clans here mainly cultivated their physical bodies. Ding! System notification. Attention host, a special plant has been detected, the ancient 7-feather tree. It is recommended that the host collect it immediately. The ancient 7-feather tree was named after its feather-like fruits. Each time it bore 7 fruits. There would only be 7 of them. The ancient 7 feather tree's fruits had a very special ability. After eating them, the person who consumed them would lose weight rapidly. Even if one lost weight, it wouldn't affect one's strength. That was why the ancient 7 feather tree had become a treasure of the ancient beasts. Almost every member of the ancient beasts would consume one on their coming-of-age ceremony. After all, without consuming the ancient 7 feather tree's magical fruits, the ancient beasts would not be able to move so quickly with their physique. After receiving the system notification, Yi Xian immediately focused his attention in that direction. Sure enough, there was an ancient tree growing in front of him. The 7 feather-like things on the tree were the fruits. However, at this moment, there were 4 ancient beast soldiers guarding the tree. In addition, there was a strange mythical beast. Yi Xian only knew that this mythical beast was raised in captivity by the ancient beasts, but he had no idea what its abilities were. If he wanted to obtain the 7 feather tree, he would have to defeat these 5 guys. Yi Xian released his divine telekinesis and observed carefully. He found that the 4 ancient beasts were guarding one side of the tree. They did not leave at all. It seemed that he had to force his way in. Kill! Yi Xian roared and rushed forward. At the same time, the 5 ancient beasts attacked with their divine telekinesis. Ayo-woo! The sudden attack caused the 4 ancient beasts to panic. However, this time, Yi Xian's divine telekinesis attack did not kill the ancient beasts. Just as Yi Xian was puzzled, he found that the mythical beast that was patrolling the area was emitting a strange energy that protected the 4 ancient beasts. The divine telekinesis attack was blocked. What kind of power was this? Yi Xian had seen many methods that could shield his spiritual sense, but the method that the ancient beast used to shield his spiritual sense was something that Yi Xian had never seen before. It seemed to be an ancient beast's divine telekinesis, but it did not seem to be. System, detect that guy's method. Right now, Yi Xian's detection consumed faith points, so Yi Xian didn't have a lot of faith points left. However, he still had to use what he needed. Ding. System notification. The target is using pulsating demon ability. Pulsating demon ability? Yi Xian frowned. This was a new ability that he had never heard of before. Pulsating demon ability used one's meridians as storage points and one's body as the foundation to create a special array. This kind of energy was unique to ancient beasts and was even more advanced than divine telekinesis attacks. This was because divine telekinesis could only be stored in one's mind, so there was a limit to how much it could be stored. No matter how much one cultivated, it could only be considered as continuously purifying the strength of one's divine telekinesis. However, it could not increase the total amount of divine telekinesis. However, pulsating demon ability was different. Pulsating demon ability could use all of one's meridians and meridians as storage points. Naturally, it could store more energy. Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not know how to use this method. Yi Xian was a little tempted. If he could master this method, wouldn't he be able to store his divine telekinesis separately in his meridians? If that was the case, then the total amount of Yi Xian's divine telekinesis would skyrocket. If that was the case, Yi Xian could only imagine the benefits. Divine Wood Sword servants, go stop that guy for me. Yi Xian waved his hand and summoned the Divine Wood Sword servants. Then, he ordered them to stop that special mythical beast. Chapter 2480. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The Big Tree. The ancient beast clan's realm division was different from ordinary realms. Because they cultivated their bodies, even Yi Xian wasn't able to obtain an accurate division of their strength. He could only estimate their strength based on their status. Fortunately, the ancient beast's strength lay in their physical bodies. No matter how strong they were, they could not truly contend with Yi Xian. Yi Xian held the Godslayer in his hand. This time, he did not let Wei Zhentian control the Godslayer. Yi Xian knew full well that the Godslayer alone would not be able to break through the ancient beast's defenses. Rather than that, he might as well use his own attacks. After all, the critical strike rate of his attacks would greatly increase, and he would also have a chance to trigger a one-hit kill. Ever since Wei Zhentian had become the weapon spirit of the Godslayer and gained the form of the Godslayer, Yi Xian had not personally controlled the Godslayer in battle for a long time. Deicide slash. He suddenly slashed with the sword. A boom was heard, and one of the ancient beasts was sent flying by the sword. Yi Xian did not stop there. With the Godslayer in hand, He immediately chased after the ancient beasts. The ancient beasts' attack and defense were not weak. They were also very agile. However, they only relied on their physical strength and did not use any special abilities. As a result, they were not much of a threat to Yi Xian. It could be said that the most important thing for Yi Xian to deal with the ancient beasts was patience. He had to find a way to wear his opponent down. He did not need to use too much explosive power. Unlike any of the enemies Yi Xian had encountered before, if he wanted to kill the ancient beast clan, it was impossible for him to expect to be able to do so in a single burst of power. Six-syllable mantra, die. Yi Xian activated the six-syllable mantra, hoping to use the mysterious power of the six-syllable mantra to kill his enemy. However, this time, Yi Xian failed. This damned ancient beasts actually ignored the power of the six-syllable mantra. Deicide/. Helpless, Yi Xian swung his sword again, forcing the ancient beast clan member to retreat. Then, he gathered all of his divine sense and released a divine sense sword. The ancient beast that had been suppressed by Yi Xian finally showed a pained expression. It was obvious that the full power of Yi Xian's spiritual force attack had broken through his defense. Ayo! What Yi Xian did not expect was that the mythical beast was also crying out in pain. The mythical beast's mana pulse could actually help the ancient beasts withstand damage. Seeing the pained expression on the divine beast's face, Yi Xian's mind moved in an instant. He immediately gave up on attacking the ancient beast in front of him and joined hands with the divine wood sword attendant to directly launch a powerful attack on the divine beast. It didn't take long for Yi Xian to kill the divine beast. After that, it was easy for him to kill the four ancient beasts. After clearing out the guards, Yi Xian finally came to the seven-feathered tree as he wished. With a casual wave of his hand, the seven-feathered tree was uprooted by Yi Xian without any ability to resist and directly absorbed into the devouring space. This was because Yi Xian wanted to see if he could grow such a magical plant in the devouring space. Yi Xian originally thought that it would take some effort to grow the seven-feathered tree. However, to Yi Xian's surprise, the seven-feathered tree's vitality was unusually strong. It was not affected by the environment at all. Even after transplanting it into the devouring space, it adapted quickly. With a wave of his hand, the 5 ancient beast corpses on the ground were devoured by Yi Xian and turned into experience points for leveling up. Ding! System notification. Host has broken through to Superior Rank 5 Divine Emperor Realm. Yi Xian could see that in the Drought Sea, one's cultivation level was not so important. This was because the ancient beast's fighting style was completely different. The difference in cultivation level would greatly reduce the suppression of the ancient beasts. Of course, the higher one's cultivation level was, the more advantage one would have. With the God-Slayer in hand, Yi Xian walked forward. The Drought Sea was enormous. There was still a long way to go before Yi Xian could reach it. Originally, Yi Xian only wanted to kill ancient beasts here to increase his cultivation level. However, it seemed that there were some things in the Drought Sea that could be kept in the devouring space. This was because there were many things in the Drought Sea that did not exist in the outside world. There were even some rare races among them. These rare races had their own unique characteristics. It just so happened that Yi Xian could take them all. It was almost impossible to find such a dense collection of rare races in the outside world. However, there were many rare races in the Drought Sea. After all, the Drought Sea was already considered a rare place. There was probably no other Drought Sea in the entire realm of the gods. Moreover, if Yi Xian continued killing, it would not be long before the ancient beasts became a rare race as well. It was a tree, an incomparably huge and strangely shaped tree. Yi Xian raised his head and looked at the tree in the sky. For a moment, he was stunned. Not long ago, Yi Xian noticed something in the sky and rushed over. When he arrived, he saw this strange tree. Actually, just by looking at the tree's appearance, it looked like an ordinary banyan tree in the realm of the gods. It was not surprising that it had not cultivated any intelligence. However, if one looked at the nutrients it was absorbing, one would not think so. Almost all of the tree was floating in the air. Its thick roots were scattered all over the sky. These roots had several different forms. The most common one was translucent. These roots were densely packed in the air. They were constantly refining the wandering divine power in the surroundings into nourishment. Next were the roots that were as white as jade. It was hard to imagine that these roots were actually refining the power of laws to become nutrients for the tree. It could even devour the power of laws. If one were to say that this tree was simple, They would be stupid. The tree was enormous. Standing on the ground, Yi Xian felt like he was not looking at a tree, but a mountain. Moreover, it was an enormous mountain. Yi Xian was already thinking. Although Yi Xian had not figured out what this tree was for, it would not stop Yi Xian from wanting to absorb it into the devouring space. With divine power and the power of laws as nutrients, this tree must have some mysterious power. Devour. Yi Xian did not think too much about it. He treated this tree like the plants he had encountered before and tried to absorb it directly. However, this time he failed. It was not a complete failure. This was because after Yi Xian activated his devouring ability, one of the roots was absorbed into the devouring space. Yi Xian was slightly stunned. He could sense from the devouring space that the roots were constantly absorbing the power of the devouring space to feed the tree. Yi Xian raised an eyebrow. Chapter 2481. Strange again and again, devour. This time, Yi Xian increased his devouring power in an attempt to grab the tree. However, Yi Xian failed once. Apart from letting more roots enter the devouring space and continuously absorbing energy to feed the tree, Yi Xian gained nothing. Damn it! If Yi Xian did not solve this problem, Yi Xian's devouring space would become the tree's source of energy. And it would be an endless source of energy. In that case, how exactly would he be able to take this tree away? Even the laws were just nourishment for the tree. Yi Xian could not think of any other methods. Suddenly, Yi Xian's eyes lit up. He thought of a type of energy that Yi Xian had just obtained. Because just a moment ago, Yi Xian discovered that at this moment, the strange tree had a faint star energy surrounding it. Moreover, while the tree was extremely afraid of astral energy, it would also think of ways to extract it. Since that was the case, why didn't Yi Xian use the astral energy as bait? Yi Xian's hands continuously condensed strands of astral energy, which were all stored in Yi Xian's devouring space. Yi Xian's idea was very simple. He wanted to use the astral energy as bait to lure the tree and then subdue it. This ancient tree was obviously not as brainless as imagined. It should have some basic consciousness. Since it had some basic consciousness, it was a good thing for Yi Xian. This way, using the astral energy as bait would increase his chances of success. Yi Xian did not have much astral energy, so it was only a fist-sized piece in the devouring space. The fist-sized piece of astral energy constantly emitted a resplendent glow. It was very dazzling. Yi Xian activated his devouring power again in an attempt to subdue the ancient tree. Devour. This was his third attempt. If it did not succeed, Yi Xian would have no choice but to give up. A strong suction force was activated, but the tree remained unmoved. Could it be that Yi Xian had failed again? Suddenly, a tentacle appeared around the ball of astral energy in the devouring space. Then, more and more tentacles began to gather around the ball of light. There was movement. As long as there was movement, it was a good thing. Yi Xian waited silently. Indeed, after a while, the tree's tentacles outside dwindled and all of them gathered around the ball of astral energy. A moment later, the large tree disappeared. As for Yi Xian's devouring space, there was an additional large tree. Actually, it was not a good feeling because Yi Xian did not take the tree away, but Yi Xian, the tree had entered the devouring space itself. In other words, from beginning to end, Yi Xian was unable to do anything to this tree. But no matter what, as long as the tree was absorbed into the devouring space, it was undoubtedly a good thing. After the tree entered the devouring space, Yi Xian could clearly feel the benefits of the tree. Yi Xian did not know how many tentacles the tree had. This was because just like when Yi Xian had forcefully subdued him in the beginning, only a few roots had entered the devouring space. The roots of this big tree were actually spread throughout many places. In various parts of the Divine Realm continent, in some secret realms, there might be roots of that big tree. However, as long as the tree's main body was in the devouring space, then the benefits would naturally flow to the devouring space. The tree used divine power and the power of laws as nutrients, but what it emitted was the power of life. This power of life was extremely strong and dispersed directly into the air. In other words, the entire devouring space would benefit. However, there was only one tree, so the benefits would be much less. Yi Xian seemed to understand why the ancient beasts in the Drought Sea had such strong vitality. Because of the existence of these ancient trees, they constantly converted divine power and the power of laws into vitality. Therefore, it was many times more difficult to cultivate in the Drought Sea than in the outside world. However, the vitality here was unusually strong, so much so that the ancient beasts did not even need to cultivate. Just by breathing, they would naturally be strengthened by the boundless vitality. If possible, Yi Xian naturally wanted to collect more of these trees. There were many mysteries in the Drought Sea, but this was only the beginning. Yi Xian was like a fish in water in the Drought Sea. On one hand, he could kill the ancient beasts to increase his strength, and on the other, he could collect all kinds of strange items. It was quite interesting. System, what is this? After subduing the tree, Yi Xian did not have time to leave before he saw a strange divine beast running towards him. This divine beast was not considered ugly. The reason why he was called strange was because there was a flower growing out of this fellow's head. There were many bright and beautiful flowers. A divine beast with a flower growing on its head? Then was it a beast? Or a plant? Yi Xian watched curiously as the divine beast ran. It seemed to be looking for something. Ding! System notification. Rare species detected. Divine flower beast. It is recommended that the host capture it immediately. There is no rush. System, what is up with this divine flower beast? Why is it half animal and half plant? Ding! System notification. The divine flower beast has a special ability, Plant Psychic. This ability allows the divine flower beast to transform into any flower and live on a plant. Yi Xian was stunned. An animal living on a plant? This was unheard of. Could it be that this guy was like a plant and could use sunlight as nourishment to cultivate? Ding! System notification. The divine flower beast has a special ability, Form Imitation. Once activated, it can perfectly merge itself with the plant and allow the plant to share its energy with it. Yi Xian did not know whether to laugh or cry. Meeting such a strange creature, Yi Xian was speechless. This guy really did rely on plants to feed itself. However, this method of survival was quite unique. Yi Xian could guess what this guy was looking for. He was probably looking for that big tree from before. Perhaps this guy had been living on that big tree all this time. Since this was a rare species, Yi Xian took it into his devouring space. He placed it around the tree. Sure enough, just as Yi Xian had expected, when the flower god beast saw the tree, it revealed an excited expression. It leaped up and jumped high onto the tree. In the blink of an eye, the divine flower beast had completely disappeared. It had completely merged with the tree. No one would be able to detect any abnormality at all. The more Yi Xian looked at it, the more he found it interesting. This divine flower beast was quite special. Chapter 2482. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The Cage of Precepts. The reason why Yi Xian hadn't encountered too much danger along the way was because it was still considered an outer area, so the ancient beast clan wasn't on guard against it. As Yi Xian ventured deeper, the ancient beast's defenses became tighter and tighter. More and more creatures belonging to the Drought Sea began to appear. What kind of divine beast is this? Yi Xian looked at the scene in front of him strangely. He could not understand what was going on. The divine beast's body shone with a metallic light, and its back was full of long thorns like swords. Suddenly, the divine beast fixed its gaze on Yi Xian. Obviously, it had noticed Yi Xian and was hostile to Yi Xian. Whoosh! 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 Several beams of cold light suddenly flew out from the divine beast's back. In the blink of an eye, they were already attacking Yi Xian. Wei Zhentian flew out without hesitation and rushed toward the cold light. The light flashed, and after a while, several broken swords fell to the ground. However, this was just the beginning. Just as the broken swords fell, thousands of cold lights appeared again and rushed toward Yi Xian. The two god-slaying swords blocked Yi Xian's front, preventing the cold lights from getting close to Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian was very confused. What was this divine beast? Ding! System notification. Target set. Sword Forging Beast. The Sword Forging Beast was formed from the divine sword forging furnace left behind by the ancient sword forging master. Its original form was only a sword forging furnace, but it was formed by chance. The Sword Forging Beast's special ability was to forge swords to attack. The Sword Forging Beast could quickly forge all kinds of divine swords within its body to attack. The quality of the divine swords was randomly determined. At the same time, if the attack failed, the divine swords would automatically be retrieved. At the same time that he heard the system notification, Yi Xian clearly saw the scene of the divine sword being retracted. He saw the broken swords on the ground turn into streams of light and fly back to the divine beast's side. What a sword-forging beast! With its special ability, it could be said that it could do whatever it wanted in the Drought Sea. Unfortunately, its opponent was Yi Xian. Although the sword-forging beast's body structure compared to the beast's, it could not make Yi Xian helpless. Yi Xian saw Yi Xian quickly took out the divine bow of law, then pulled the bowstring without hesitation. The puppet's power. Yi Xian was Yi Xian's. Was he Yi Xian? The sword-forging beast's translation of the translation. Translation. Fong's as on translation as translation. Although the sword-casting beast had a certain chance of failure when refining the divine sword, even a weapon refiner had a chance of failure when refining a magic treasure. Yi Xian might not need it himself, but if he brought the sword-forging beast back to the Jiufeng 60,000 mirror of the Kunlun god domain, he might be able to get a good result. Of course, it would be difficult to tame the sword-forging beast just by using the puppet's power. 7 divine arrows of law descended beside the sword-forging beast at the same time. Not all of the divine arrows of law were divine runes, but 4 of them contained the power of divine runes. These 4 divine runes formed an inescapable net, trapping the sword-forging beast in a cage of law in an instant. As for the other 3 laws, they formed a chain that spanned across the sky and reinforced the cage once again. Bang, bang, bang. Crisp sounds came from the cage. The divine beast of law was struggling, trying to escape. Clang, clang, clang. The law cage trembled in mid-air from the impact, and a crack actually appeared on it. Yi Xian immediately drew his bow, and several divine arrows of law flew out, strengthening the cage again. Bastard, if you submit to me today, I can spare your life. If you don't submit, don't blame me for tearing you to pieces. Yi Xian roared. The sword-forging beast was a divine beast that had gained sentience, so Yi Xian believed that the sword-forging beast could understand him. Roar! The sword-forging beast roared in response to Yi Xian with its anger. Huge power kept crashing into the cage of law. After the crazy sword-forging beast knew Yi Xian's intention, it became even crazier and struggled even harder. You don't submit, right? Today, I'll beat you until you submit. The sword-forging beast did not have any divine runes, so Yi Xian was not worried that it could break out of the cage of law. Yi Xian drew his divine bow of law again, and all kinds of violent divine runes flew out from the divine arrows of law. Ferocious attacks filled the inside of the law cage with all kinds of terrifying power. Roar! The sword-forging beast let out a tragic cry, but Yi Xian was unmoved. He did not put away the divine bow of law in his hand. Instead, he casually threw Absolute Zero. Absolute Zero could not trap the sword-forging beast for too long, but even if it was just a blink of an eye, it was enough for Yi Xian to do a lot of things and launch countless powerful attacks. Do you submit? Yi Xian asked loudly. But the sword-forging beast did not show any other reaction besides roaring. If you don't submit, then continue to endure. 6 syllables of truth cripple. With Yi Xian's roar, a mysterious power was immediately activated. The sword-forging beast paused for a moment, but because of its strong physical body, it was not really crippled. Still, it was slightly injured. The sword-forging beast finally showed fear in its eyes. After all, Yi Xian had injured it with just 1 sentence and no other action. How could it not be shocked? The sword-forging beast was not stupid, but it was transformed from a sword-forging cauldron, so it would not be too resistant to submit to an expert. But after all, the sword-forging beast had long been used to being at ease after thousands of years. If someone suddenly wanted to subdue it, it would naturally resist. At this moment, the sword-forging beast was in a daze, but its anger had decreased by a lot. Yi Xian did not know this. Seeing that the sword-forging beast still had no intention of submitting, Yi Xian launched another attack. Divine Telekinesis Suppression. This time, Yi Xian directly used the power of his divine telekinesis. No matter how powerful the sword-forging beast was, it had only cultivated for a short time and could not possibly possess a strong divine telekinesis. After all, the sword-forging beast lived in the Drought Sea. Where could it find a cultivation method? The strong divine telekinesis suppression descended on the sword-forging beast. At the same time, Yi Xian's voice sounded. Do you submit? Roar. Chapter 2483. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios subduing the Swordforge beast. Yi Xian's divine telekinesis increased in intensity. Are you still not convinced? This time, the divine telekinesis pressure was almost tangible. Furthermore, Yi Xian had even added in his killing intent. Yi Xian's patience was running out. He was on the verge of dying. I'll give you one last chance. Submit or die. Boom. The Swordforge beast finally gave in under the divine telekinesis pressure. It knelt on the ground. At the same time, a divine telekinesis sword hovered above the Swordforge beast's head. At the same time, the nomological mystical arrows in Yi Xian's hands flashed. The two god-slaying swords were ready to strike at any time. It was obvious that Yi Xian was ready to kill. If the Swordforge beast did not submit, he would have no choice. Yi Xian did not speak. He waited silently. Yi Xian could not make the Swordforge beast's decision. However, Yi Xian had given it a chance. If it was stubborn, Yi Xian would not mind devouring it. However, the Swordforge beast was not stupid. After realizing that it had no choice, the Swordforge beast no longer hesitated. It sent its quintessence shard out of the cage. The quintessence shard glowed faintly and slowly floated toward Yi Xian. Yi Xian smirked. With a wave of his hand, he collected the quintessence shard. At the same time, all the attacks aimed at the Swordforge beast disappeared. Master! Master! A voice entered the Swordforge beast's mind. However, this voice sounded somewhat immature. It turned out that although the Swordforge beast had lived for tens of millions of years, it had only cultivated for the last 100,000 years. It had only developed sentience recently. After all, it was only a Swordforge cauldron. It was not that easy for it to develop sentience. Since you're a Swordforge cauldron, I'll call you Lil Cauldron. Lil Cauldron, you grew up here. Is there anything special about this place? Yi Xian asked the sword-forging beast. This was because Yi Xian felt that since it was said that this was a place left behind by an ancient expert to forge swords, there might be something else. Master, this place has long since been abandoned. Most of the things have disappeared. However, the original master left behind a sealed place. Perhaps there are some special existences there. The original owner was that ancient almighty being. Since that was the case, there might really be a fortuitous encounter inside. All right, take me there immediately. Yi Xian said to the sword-forging beast without hesitation. The sword-forging beast led Yi Xian towards a large mountain. On the surface, there was nothing special about this mountain. However, as the sword-forging beast led the way, Yi Xian discovered that there was actually a hidden restriction here. Yi Xian had never seen this kind of restriction before. Clearly, it was a technique from the distant past. The sword-forging beast led Yi Xian according to a certain walking pattern. It would either advance or retreat, left or right. Sometimes it would even walk on the spot. However, the strange thing was that the scenery in front of Yi Xian was changing. Master, this is my home. There is a strange restriction here. It's a little like overlapping space. If you walk according to the specific walking pattern, you will be able to walk home. However, if you make a single mistake, you will be immediately pushed out. Yi Xian nodded. Although Yi Xian had never seen this kind of technique before, Yi Xian had seen something similar. That was overlapping space. Perhaps this place was like that too. Yi Xian followed the sword-forging beast's footsteps. It could be said that every step was very careful. There was not the slightest mistake. Finally, after walking for a full hour, the scenery in front of Yi Xian suddenly changed. The top of a mountain. This was the top of a huge mountain. Moreover, the top of this mountain had clearly been shaved off by someone. However, the top was not really non-existent. Instead, it was suspended not far away, forming a floating island. Yi Xian carefully observed for a moment, only to discover that the mountain beneath his feet, along with the floating island, wasn't it the mountain he saw before? If not for the sword-forging beast leading the way, even if Yi Xian climbed to the top of the mountain, he would not be able to see the difference at all. What a strange restriction. What a strange place. At this moment, the place where Yi Xian was already deserted. In front of Yi Xian was a mound of earth. Yi Xian could vaguely make out the shape of a sword furnace. Logically speaking, A sword furnace built by an ancient almighty should not have been destroyed even after thousands of years. However, the sword furnace had already cultivated into a beast. Naturally, it could not exist for long. Instead, the broken swords and broken materials that were casually thrown around were rather well preserved. This time, Yi Xian did not need the system to tell him that these things were good stuff. The materials that the ancient almighty used to forge divine swords, even if they were just scraps or leftovers, were definitely ancient resources now. Therefore, Yi Xian would not let them go. Ding! Congratulations to the host. You have obtained an ancient material, 7 night corners. Ding! Congratulations to the host. You have obtained an ancient material, Fengqi undying wood. Ding! Congratulations to the host. You have obtained an ancient material, 8 desolate 6 directions longevity holy water. One system notification after another sounded out. Yi Xian had a smile on his face. This time, he'd made a huge profit. Not to mention using these ancient resources, even if Yi Xian used them to devour them, Yi Xian would still be able to reach several levels. However, Yi Xian would not devour them, because these materials were all good stuff. They could definitely be used to forge divine weapons. Even if they were not used to forge divine weapons, the god-slaying sword could still evolve after devouring them. Therefore, these materials were kept by Yi Xian in the devouring space. However, although these things were good stuff in Yi Xian's eyes, they were trash in the eyes of the swordsmithing beast. Master, this trash is everywhere. What do you need it for? Trash? Yi Xian glared at the swordsmithing beast. This kind of trash, no matter how much there was, Yi Xian, would accept it all. You mean to say that there are such things here? Yes, master. There is a warehouse in front. It is where these trash and broken swords are stored. Yi Xian did not waste any more time and walked towards the so-called warehouse. A warehouse. It was indeed a warehouse. In a huge stone cave, there were countless materials. Perhaps this place had been well organized before, but now, there was no one to take care of it. Naturally, it was in ruins. Ancient God Emperor Engen. It is said that the ancient God Emperor Tree of Grace no longer exists. Who would have thought that I would be able to find the ancient God Emperor Engen here? Although the ancient God Emperor Engen is not a material for forging weapons, it can be used to carve Dharma images. It is very beneficial for collecting faith points. Chapter 2484. Sword Forging Legacy. Could this black bead be the eyeball of the evil Sky King, one of the 12 heavenly dragons? Why would it be here? The evil Sky Dragon fought against several human experts alone. It is said that the human race suffered heavy losses in order to attack the heavenly dragon tribe, which gave the other divine beast tribes a chance. Heavenly Demon Feather. Is this the Heavenly Demon Feather? The Heavenly Demon tribe is an extinct mystical tribe. I didn't expect to find a feather left behind by them here. Yi Xian looked at everything in front of him in astonishment. All these things made Yi Xian feel as if he had entered a huge treasure trove. Materials were constantly being absorbed into Yi Xian's devouring space. These things, whether or not they were useful in the eyes of the ancient almighty, even if they were trash, were absolutely good things now. For Yi Xian, this was a great opportunity that could only be found by chance. Yi Xian would not give up this opportunity no matter what. Yi Xian would definitely take all these things away. Resources were constantly being categorized. Those that Yi Xian recognized would be taken away. Those that he didn't recognize would be appraised by the system. Those that he couldn't appraise would be kept. However, not everything was useful. Many materials were useless because of the lack of other supplementary materials. Sigh, what a pity. This is the main material for refining the Heavenly Saint Divine Seal, but the other essential special material for refining the Heavenly Saint Divine Seal has long been extinct. Even if I get this thing now, I can't use it at all. What a pity, what a pity. Forget it. Since I can't find a suitable use for it, I can't waste it. I'll just devour it. Yi Xian waved his hand and the material that had been deemed useless was directly devoured by Yi Xian. Ding. Congratulations to the host for breaking through. The host is now a superior level 6 divine emperor. Yi Xian didn't pay attention to the system's notification because Yi Xian knew very well that there would be more levels later. Resources were quickly categorized. Yi Xian had picked up a huge bargain this time. It could be said that the harvest this time was extremely rich. If compared to the harvest in the ancient Zither-space, not to mention the fact that there were not many resources in the ancient Zither-space, even if there were in quantity, it was impossible to obtain so much. The harvest this time was probably enough for the ancient Zither-space to produce for 1,000 years. At the same time, the resources that Yi Xian deemed to be useless were also devoured by Yi Xian. One had to know that many of the resources that Yi Xian had devoured were already considered unique existences in the God realm. They were already extinct. However, Yi Xian didn't hesitate to devour them all. The value of these things could not be measured with spirit stones. Many experts had some special hobbies. Among them, collecting extinct resources was something most experts liked to do. However, Yi Xian didn't care. Ding! Host has broken through. The host is now a superior level 7 Divine Emperor. Along with the system's notification, it was unknown how many resources Yi Xian had devoured. This item was the material of a divine beast. This divine beast was called the Moon Devourer Spirit. It was a mysterious ancient divine beast. In the realm of the gods, not to mention the moon, even starlight was hard to find. However, the Moon Devourer Spirit had a special ability. It could use a strange ability to gather all the scattered energy of the divine moon. In the ancient era, the Moon Devourer Spirit was already an extremely rare existence, let alone now. The realm of the gods naturally didn't have such a divine beast anymore. As for their spirit moon pearl, the one that Yi Xian had just devoured was probably the last one in the realm of the gods. The spirit moon pearl didn't have many uses. It could only emit a strange kind of moonlight. This moonlight was very beautiful and very gentle. It had a special effect on retaining a woman's beauty. It was said that if one used the spirit moon pearl to build an underground palace, not to mention living in it all year round, just going there once in a while would have the same effect as taking a face-retaining pill. Unfortunately, this item would no longer exist in the realm of the gods in the future. The sword-forging beast looked at its master in confusion. In the sword-forging beast's heart, it couldn't understand Yi Xian's joy at all. It even wondered what was wrong with Yi Xian. One had to know that in the sword-forging beast's heart, these things were just trash. They were all worthless things. However, Yi Xian liked them so much. This was what the sword-forging beast couldn't understand. Yi Xian practically dug 3 feet into the ground to identify everything that he could see. He kept the useful ones and devoured the useless ones. He didn't waste anything that wasn't even worth devouring. In the future, he would leave it for auction. It would definitely be a fortune for the customer. When Yi Xian was finally done, the sword-forging beast said to Yi Xian, "Master, please follow me. The only place in the house that is still intact is here. The original owner set up a restriction here. I can't enter at all. However, I can be sure that the inside hasn't been destroyed." Did that mean that these places outside had already been looted by someone? Yi Xian's expression turned ugly. This meant that there were many other good things here. Of course, Yi Xian recovered after a short while. After all, even if someone had ransacked this place, it would have been many years ago. Moreover, it was very likely that it wasn't done by humans. One had to know that these things were all good things even in the ancient times. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be so many things left here, regardless of whether it was a human or a divine beast expert who came here. There were only 2 reasons to explain why there were so many good things here. One was that the person who looted this place was definitely more powerful than the ancient times. The other possibility was that the thing that destroyed this place was something without intelligence. Yi Xian didn't dwell on this question. He followed the sword-forging beast directly to the restricted area. There was an ancient restriction set up here. For a moment, Yi Xian couldn't do anything about it. However, Yi Xian wouldn't give up. Since there was a restriction here, it meant that there might be something completely sealed inside. Yi Xian's understanding of restrictions was quite good. After all, he was a restriction master. At the same time, he was also a divine talisman master, array master, and so on. Therefore, it wasn't too difficult for him to study this array. At least, it was easier for him compared to others. It could be said that if Yi Xian couldn't break this restriction, there wouldn't be many people in the entire realm of the gods who could. Yi Xian sat cross-legged and began to think. He sat there for a whole year. For a year, Yi Xian didn't move at all. It was as if he had turned into a stone. The sword-forging beast also stayed by Yi Xian's side, silently waiting for Yi Xian. On this day, as usual, Yi Xian sat cross-legged. The sword-forging beast silently glanced at Yi Xian. When it saw that Yi Xian still didn't move, it prepared to go out for a stroll. Chapter 2485. Translator, Nyoibo Studio Editor. Nyoibo Studio Divine Heavenly Sword Request, so that's how it is. A faint voice, just 4 short words. But these 4 words had been waiting for a full year. After a year, Yi Xian finally understood them. Yi Xian did not care about the situation around him. The sword-forging beast consciously guarded Yi Xian while Wei Zhenqian controlled the god-slaying sword to move around Yi Xian. Yi Xian silently stood up and walked to the side of the barrier that was like a light screen. Then, he directly pressed his hand onto it. A bright light burst forth and pierced through the clouds. It could be said that from the outside, the entire mountain peak was emitting a bright light. Unfortunately, no one knew where this light was coming from. Moreover, this was the Drought Sea. The ancient beasts would not do such a thing. The light continued, but Yi Xian's body slowly faded. It was the power of the stars. Wasn't Yi Xian's current state the translucent state he was in when he understood the power of the stars? It turned out that the power of the stars had been incorporated into this barrier. How many people in the realm of the gods had the power of the stars? To have the power of the stars, to have a good understanding of barriers, and to have sufficient strength. In the current realm of the gods, it would be difficult to find anyone other than Yi Xian. It was as if this place was specially built for Yi Xian. Of course, this was something that was impossible. The only explanation was that in this era of great sword-forging masters, the power of the stars was a very common thing. The light in Yi Xian's hand continued to shine, and the barrier quickly reversed. The method to open the barrier was very simple. It only needed to reverse the direction of the barrier. Perhaps this place was not a restriction at all. It was merely a door. However, this door was made using a special method and the power of the stars had been incorporated into it. That was why it was so mysterious and unbreakable. The root of all this was the power of the stars. It could be said that if it weren't for Qianhu, even Yi Xian wouldn't have been able to do anything to him. Yi Xian pushed the door open and entered. However, when he entered, he found that the interior was not filled with treasures as he had imagined. Instead, there was only an altar and a box. Yi Xian silently walked over, but in his heart, he was incomparably puzzled. Could it be that this ancient supreme being only had this kind of box as his collection? Then what was in the box? Yi Xian used his divine telekinesis to probe the box. After confirming that there was no danger, he took the box. Opening the box, an illusory figure appeared. It was an old man wearing a 5-colored battlesuit. He had grizzled hair and a smile on his face. Finally, someone has obtained my inheritance. The 10 million years of waiting have not been in vain. Yi Xian was shocked. Just what kind of cultivation level did one need to be in order for a strand of soul to not be destroyed for thousands of years? One had to know that since the sword-forging grandmaster was no longer around, his godhead had probably been shattered. Yet, a strand of his soul had actually survived for tens of thousands of years. Greetings, senior. Yi Xian respectfully bowed to the strand of soul. After all, this was an expert from thousands of years ago. Yi Xian still had to show some respect. Dispense with the formalities. Fated person, the fact that you are able to come here means that we are fated. I don't have much time, so I won't say too much nonsense. This box contains my sword-forging inheritance. I only hope that you can promise me one thing. You must definitely master the divine heavenly sword. Divine heavenly sword? Yi Xian was a little surprised. He didn't know how powerful this divine sword that had been separated by the ancient Almighty for tens of thousands of years was. Senior, may I know what's so special about this divine heavenly sword? There's nothing special about the divine heavenly sword. It's just a wish of mine. This divine heavenly sword was nurtured with the power of faith. We spent millions of years to gather the power of faith of countless believers. This divine heavenly sword represents a belief that the world is harmonious. Kid, your current cultivation level is still too low, so it's impossible for you to come into contact with something of that level. However, I have to tell you, kid, don't underestimate the power of faith. Only the power of faith is the purest form of energy. The power of faith was a cultivation energy? Yi Xian was even more confused. After all, Yi Xian had been using the power of faith all this time, but he didn't see that it could be used for cultivation. However, Yi Xian also knew that this old man wouldn't lie to him. Then, Was it because the inheritance of the thing the old man was talking about had been lost? Or was it because his strength wasn't enough to understand that level of existence? Yi Xian didn't know that much. Of course, Yi Xian couldn't care so much. Since this divine heavenly sword was the wish of this almighty swordsmith, and Yi Xian had obtained his inheritance, then helping him forge a divine heavenly sword wasn't a big deal. Alright, senior, look, I promise you. As long as I have the ability, I'll definitely forge this divine heavenly sword. Good, good, good. The almighty swordsmith repeated the word, good, 3 times before continuing. Then, I'm relieved. This remnant soul of mine has been sealed by me using a special method. I don't know anything else. In fact, you can treat me as a letter. Now that you've obtained the inheritance, my mission can be considered complete. After saying that, the remnant soul turned into specks of starlight and disappeared. Yi Xian bowed to the remnant soul again before receiving the wooden box. Obviously, the wooden box wasn't made of ordinary wood. Otherwise, it wouldn't have remained intact for thousands of years. Unfortunately, Yi Xian didn't know what the box was made of. Inside the box was a bamboo scroll. The forging method recorded on the bamboo scroll was no longer in use. However, there was something special about these bamboo slips. That was, they were capable of recording a lot of things. Perhaps it was because in that era, the bamboo scroll was the best at recording things. Yi Xian quickly accepted the knowledge regarding the forging of divine swords. This almighty swordsmith was special. He could only forge all kinds of divine swords. It could be said that he could forge divine swords of all kinds of quality. Moreover, many of the quality were already beyond the current era. Yi Xian called them immemorial mystical armaments. This method of forging immemorial mystical armaments was probably the only one in the entire god realm. Yi Xian silently left. In this world that had been sealed for thousands of years, Yi Xian didn't want to destroy it. Let's go, little cauldron. Let's leave this place. Yi Xian directly led the swordsmith beast out of this special area. When they left, they even concealed the aura of this place. It could be said that other than Yi Xian and the swordsmith beast, it was impossible for anyone to enter this place. Chapter 2486. Strengthening the god-slaying sword. Yi Xian's trip to the Drought Sea was not in vain. Even if Yi Xian did not gain anything later on, Yi Xian had already made a huge profit. The method of forging immemorial mystical armaments recorded in the sword forging legacy had long been lost. Of course, the materials required were also very special. It could be said that even the lowest grade required ancient resources. Fortunately, Yi Xian's devouring space could provide these resources, so there was nothing to be afraid of. After Yi Xian left, he did not continue exploring the Drought Sea. Instead, he found a remote place and set up restrictions and arrays. He built a furnace and prepared to forge a sword. Of course, he was not forging a sword, but strengthening the god-slaying sword. The god-slaying sword was already considered extremely powerful, but according to the records of the sword forging legacy, Yi Xian discovered that the god-slaying sword still had many shortcomings. This time, Yi Xian's goal was to integrate the arrays into the god-slaying sword. Of course, the integrated array was not ordinary. It was a special array called 1 becomes 10,000. The effect of this array was that once it was activated, it could turn one god-slaying sword into 10,000. Once it succeeded, the benefits would naturally be indescribable. Little Cauldron, Divine Wood Sword Attendant, Wei Zhentian, watch for me. No one is allowed to disturb me. Yi Xian instructed the sword-forging beast and the rest. Then, he sealed the cave and locked himself in. Practicing in the cave would not affect him at all, and it would also prevent some troublesome things such as light and sound. Fire rise! With a wave of his hand, a 7-colored flame immediately rose from the sword furnace. This was the lowest grade of flame. The mysterious 7-colored flame was just the flame that Yi Xian used to nurture the furnace. This time, Yi Xian needed to use a total of 12 different flames. Each of these flames could be said to be extremely rare. Fortunately, Yi Xian had learned them all from the sword forging legacy. This sword forging legacy included the inheritance of flames, materials, arrays, runes, and other aspects. It was definitely not just the sword forging legacy that he had imagined. If he didn't have the system, he wouldn't even be able to comprehend these things without hundreds or thousands of years. The flames slowly began to change, and Yi Xian did not hesitate to throw a pile of special resources into the sword furnace. The God Slayer silently floated there, quietly waiting. This training lasted for a total of 49 days. 49 days was not a long time, but unfortunately, it was enough to attract a lot of things. 3 days ago, Yi Xian had already sensed strange movements from the outside world. To be more precise, someone was attacking the mountain gate. But at that time, Yi Xian was at the most critical juncture of his sword training, so he could not afford to slack off in the slightest. He could only turn a blind eye. At this moment, there were more than a dozen experts gathered outside Yi Xian's cave. Although the ancient beasts cultivated their bodies, they were also very interested in divine weapons. To them, a good divine weapon was even more attractive than countless supreme cultivation techniques. Just 3 days ago, a burst of sword intent had erupted from the cave. That was because Yi Xian had not been able to conceal it in time while he was practicing his sword. That sword intent was incomparably sharp. It was just sword intent, but it seemed to be able to cut through heaven and earth. Therefore, the ancient beasts had charged over without hesitation. However, when they arrived, they discovered that there were 3 irksome fellows blocking their path. A sword, a divine beast, and a person. The sword was naturally transformed from Wei Zhentian, the divine beast was the sword-forging beast, and the person was the divine wood sword attendant. Master is practicing his sword. Unauthorized personnel are not allowed to enter. The sword-forging beast spoke in human language and stepped out. But why would those experts care so much? In the eyes of the ancient beasts, divine swords were innate. There was no such thing as practicing the sword. Because there were many ancient divine weapons left in the Drought Sea, the ancient beasts had always thought that the divine weapons they found were bestowed by the heavens. Now that they heard that someone was practicing the sword and were not allowed to enter, how could they agree? They thought that the sword-forging beast was just making up an excuse. Practicing the sword? Why haven't we heard of practicing the sword? Do you think we are stupid? Brothers, let's charge over. They must have hidden divine weapons. The ancient beasts said that they were not stupid. They were probably the only ones who would believe those words. However, these fellows were lacking in the head to begin with. Thus, without any explanation, they directly attacked. The divine wood sword attendant had strong defensive abilities. At this moment, they were not at a disadvantage when fighting against the ancient beasts. Wei Zhentian transformed into the god-slaying sword and moved around to provide support. The sword-forging beast supported from a distance. The 3 of them worked together and barely blocked the attacks. Unfortunately, it was just barely. As the battle progressed, it was obvious that the 3 of them were not strong enough. After 3 days, the sword-forging beast was already dispirited. Even its legs were trembling. Apparently, it was seriously injured. As for Wei Zhentian, he had changed the shape of his Dharma treasure many times. Only the divine wood sword attendant was slightly better. Unfortunately, it was only slightly better. At this moment, it was covered in wounds. Rumble! There was the sound of thunder. It was the power of divine thunder. The power of the divine thunder suddenly descended. One strike, just one strike, and the entire mountain was reduced to dust. It turned out that the god-slaying sword had finally taken shape. At this moment, it was guiding the divine thunder to do the final consolidation. Practicing the sword with divine thunder was the most common method of sword forging that Yi Xian had obtained. Moreover, the more powerful the divine thunder was, the better the effect. The destructive power finally made the ancient beasts stop what they were doing. They looked into the cave in confusion. At the same time, a figure was also walking out. Step by step, the figure walked with light steps. There was a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. Master. In an instant, the sword-forging beast and the other 2 immediately returned to Yi Xian's side. Wei Zhentian even directly removed his Dharma treasure form and hid in Yi Xian's body. The divine wood sword attendant was still guarding in front of Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian said indifferently, "All right, you go and rest. Leave the rest to me." The ancient beasts looked at Yi Xian in confusion. However, they could see that behind Yi Xian, there was something special about the god-slaying sword. Hand over the divine weapon and we will spare your life. A powerhouse from the ancient beast clan said resolutely. Unfortunately, what answered him was a powerful attack. You all are courting death. Yi Xian was never a person to be bullied, especially when someone bullied him. Moreover, it was a foreign race. Eternal Night Field. In an instant, all the ancient beasts lost their vision. No matter how strong his physical body was, Without divine will, they were trapped in the eternal night field. They could not see anything. I can't see. Kill, kill. It's dark. Why is it dark? Chapter 2487. Translator, Nyoibo Studio Editor. Nyoibo Studio 1 to 10,000. Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not continue to attack. Yi Xian was waiting for the god-slaying sword to complete its last step. Yi Xian wanted to use these guys as test subjects for the god-slaying sword. The sound of thunder continued. The god-slaying sword was experiencing its own heavenly tribulation. Thunder rumbled. Every bolt of lightning made the god-slaying sword more condensed. As time passed, the heavenly lightning fell, causing ancient patterns to appear on the god-slaying sword. These patterns were the final result of Yi Xian's forging. Runes. Strengthening runes were on the god-slaying sword. They were the main medium for the god-slaying sword to possess the 10,000 sword avatars. These rune techniques had probably long been lost. The divine talisman of the divine talisman race and these runes were two different things. The runes were very simple. Perhaps just a few simple lines had a unique use. The power of the runes was not simple. Unfortunately, the techniques used to create the runes could only be seen a little in the array. The runes now were not simple runes. They were ancient runes. Exquisite lines and simple techniques were the main methods used to create ancient runes. The power of the heavenly lightning that the god-slaying sword was experiencing was constantly refining the runes. Only by making the runes more condensed could the forging of the god-slaying sword be considered a true success. It could be said that the reason why this last process required the power of the divine lightning was because it was impossible for Yi Xian to rely on his own strength to strengthen the rune. Lightning flashed continuously. If one encountered such heavenly lightning during the heavenly tribulation in the lower realm, not to mention such a chain of heavenly lightning, even the power contained in one of them would be unstoppable. It could be said that even if Yi Xian personally resisted the power of the heavenly lightning, he would not be able to withstand more than a few bolts. However, the god-slaying sword was experiencing 999 bolts of heavenly lightning. The heavenly lightning descended at an extremely fast speed. Although it was slow, it was only half an hour. This half hour was extremely dangerous. It could be said that the god-slaying sword could break at any time. However, the god-slaying sword was not an ordinary divine sword. Therefore, the god-slaying sword persevered. The lightning disappeared and the god-slaying sword returned to Yi Xian's hand. Yi Xian held the god-slaying sword. It did not seem to be any different, but he knew that the god-slaying sword had already undergone a great change. It's time to test out the new power of the God-Slayer. I want to see what kind of power the God-Slayer has now. God-slaying sword. Slash. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. The god-slaying sword turned into thousands of phantoms in the air. These were not illusions formed from divine power, but real existences. They were replicas constructed from the power of some mysterious law. Boom, boom, boom. In the blink of an eye, the numerous ancient beast clansmen trapped in the Evernight domain suffered an unimaginable blow. The god-slaying swords turned into streaks of light in the sky, heading straight for the ancient beasts. One after another, the sword lights connected without any gaps. Poochie! No matter how strong the bodies of the ancient beasts were, how could they withstand the sharpness of the god-slaying sword? One had to know that the god-slaying sword had been tempered by the divine thunder, making it even sharper. The ancient beasts were pierced through one by one. Perhaps they did not understand what was going on until they died. In the Evernight domain, they could not see anything. They could only endure in silence. When the last god-slaying sword fell, Yi Xian finally removed the Evernight domain. At this moment, in front of Yi Xian was a broken world. Many ancient beast clansmen were cut into pieces by the god-slaying sword. The terrifying power of the god-slaying sword increased its power by several times with just one forging. The power of the swordsmithing inheritance was even more powerful than Yi Xian had expected. Obtaining this inheritance might be more useful than obtaining several powerful supernatural powers. Devour! With a wave of his hand, Yi Xian devoured the ancient beasts. After all, the corpses of the ancient beasts were still useful. Ding! System notification. Host has broken through to Superior Rank 8 Divine Emperor Realm. 2 levels in a row. This time, the devouring allowed Yi Xian to rise 2 levels in a row. It was obvious that these ancient beasts were strong. Unfortunately, they only cultivated their physical bodies. In that case, they would not be able to resist the god-slaying sword at all. Yi Xian lamented in his heart. No matter how strong one's physical body was, it was a pity that there were still flaws. If there were the same number of strong cultivators with the power of precepts, perhaps Yi Xian could use the power of the god-slaying sword to kill them, but it would not be so easy. In fact, Yi Xian might even be killed instead. Yi Xian had heard that one should not be too greedy. The best way to cultivate was to be able to choose a suitable path and move forward. However, at this moment, Yi Xian had a different idea. The requirement of the title was to be able to control more power. Whether it was a secondary profession or a number of precepts, the more power one had, the stronger one would be. And now, the result of the ancient beast's physical body was right in front of Yi Xian. Perhaps in the realm of the gods, the saying that one should not bite off more than one could chew did not make sense. In the realm of the gods, the simplest and most direct way to obtain more power was to cultivate more options. Whether it was a mystique, precepts, or a secondary profession, having more options seemed to be the best way to cultivate in the realm of the gods. Of course, although Yi Xian had this realization, it was not certain whether it would work. After all, no matter how strong a genius was, it was impossible to have too much power at once. If one cultivated too much, no matter how strong a genius was, it would not be enough. Of course, in the realm of the gods' tradition, no one would really cultivate too much. However, Yi Xian's realization was telling Yi Xian that there were benefits to cultivating too much. Let's go, let's leave this place. Yi Xian waved his hand and put away the divine wood sword servants. Then, he led the sword-forging beast outside. Along the way, Yi Xian continued to look for ancient beasts to kill. After all, ancient beasts were so easy to kill, and they gave a lot of experience. If he did not kill them, what else could he kill? Until Yi Xian's actions finally attracted the attention of the truly strong ancient beasts. On this day, Yi Xian was killing ancient beasts as usual. Then, he devoured their corpses to increase his cultivation level. However, the sky suddenly darkened. From the sky, an incomparably huge black shadow descended. It was a strange mechanical structure. It was like a pavilion that could fly. However, what drove it was not divine power or precepts. Instead, it was three strange birds. Chapter 2488. Translator, Nyoibo Studio Editor. Nyoibo Studio. The strength of the ancient beast general. As soon as the pavilion landed, they saw an ancient beast walk out from it. This ancient beast didn't look much different from the other ancient beasts. The only difference was that it was much larger in size. It was also wearing an armor made of an unknown material. Behind this ancient beast was a troop of ancient beast soldiers. When the soldiers saw Yi Xian, they immediately said, "General, this is the strange fellow who has been killing our people." General? Ancient beast general? The classification of ancient beast strength was different from that of the realm of gods. Hence, their status was usually used as a symbol of their strength. During this period of time, it could be said that Yi Xian had been killing ancient beast soldiers or ordinary ancient beasts. This was the first time he had encountered a general. During this period of killing, the ancient beasts did not attach much importance to him. In fact, they even underestimated him. In Yi Xian's eyes, ancient beasts were just experience points that were easier to kill. Although this kind of action was somewhat unfair to ancient beasts were ancient beasts after all, not humans. Therefore, Yi Xian naturally didn't feel any burden in his heart. It's like you stepped on an ant to death. Don't tell me you still feel uneasy? Although the strength of an ancient beast was many times stronger than that of an ant, it still felt that way. Who are you? Why are you killing my people? Do you have a death wish? These three questions only reinforced Yi Xian's belief in their ignorance. Yi Xian did not attach too much importance to the ancient beast general. He did not even bother to waste his breath. He chose to attack immediately. Godslayer, attack. The Godslayer's ability to split itself into 10,000 was very effective in the Drought Sea. Hence, Yi Xian did not hesitate and attacked immediately. However, this time, the result was beyond Yi Xian's expectations. The attack was ineffective. The Godslayer turned into 10,000 rays of sword light and rushed towards the ancient beast general. However, the attack was ineffective. All the attacks hit General Ancient Beast, but General Ancient Beast didn't even move. It allowed the god-slaying sword's attacks to hit it, but it didn't leave a single mark on General Ancient Beast. Perhaps the only result of this battle would be to destroy General Gu Shou's armor.
How dare you damage my armor?
As he said that, the ancient beast general smashed his fist into Yi Xian. It was so strange that Yi Xian was almost unable to react in time. Luckily, it was only a little bit more. Yi Xian reacted in time, but he only managed to take a few steps back. The advantage of taking a few steps back was that the punch did not directly hit Yi Xian. However, it did not mean that it did not affect him at all. It was just the wind from the punch, but it made Yi Xian feel extremely pressured. He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. This ancient beast general was really too strong. It was so strong that even the wind from the punch had such power. Yi Xian stopped underestimating him. This time, he realized that such a terrifying existence existed in the Drought Sea. Continue fighting? If Yi Xian knew that he couldn't win, then he would be an idiot if he forced himself to continue fighting. Yi Xian wouldn't continue fighting. After just one blow, Yi Xian already knew how strong General Ancient Beast General was. Yi Xian didn't dare to delay at all as he retreated like a madman. Some things had to be done decisively. Yi Xian already knew how strong the fallen fire was. Why would Yi Xian continue fighting? Was he looking for trouble? Flee. Flee in a sorry state. At this moment, Yi Xian no longer had the attitude of casually killing those ancient beasts. The current Yi Xian was already quite fearful of the ancient beast general. His attack had been completely ineffective, while the ancient beast general's attack, even if it was just a casual blow, was enough to make Yi Xian feel extremely uncomfortable. This was the gap between them, an extremely huge gap. Therefore, Yi Xian could only flee. Fortunately, after this period of time, Yi Xian had already leveled up. At this moment, Yi Xian was already at the peak of the 9th grade Divine Emperor realm. A superior grade 9 Divine Emperor was only one step away from reaching the Godly Venerate realm. Yi Xian's initial goal was to reach the Godly Venerate realm before leaving this place. However, the appearance of this ancient beast general forced Yi Xian to change his mind. It seemed that there was a reason why the Drought Sea was classified as a forbidden zone in the demon god's domain. Even the Divine Lord had personally led a team into this place and returned in defeat. After all, if a general had such battle strength, there must be other experts above the general. For example, a commander or a king. And it was unknown how strong these experts were. Overall, although the later stages of body refinement were weak, they still had the advantage. At least in the early stages, it wasn't easy to deal with them. Yi Xian left quickly because he was temporarily unable to contend against the ancient beast general. It could be said that if Yi Xian wanted to leave, no matter how many ancient beasts there were, they wouldn't be able to stop him. As for this mere ancient beast general, it would be impossible for him to stop Yi Xian. Yi Xian's figure flashed continuously. With just a single infinite teleportation, the ancient beast general couldn't do anything to him. No matter what, the ancient beast general could only move on foot. However, Yi Xian could infinite teleportation. Not only was his movement unpredictable, but his speed was also extremely fast. The ancient beast general couldn't do anything about it and could only eat Yi Xian's dust. Yi Xian moved crazily until he retreated 1,000,000 miles away. Only then was he truly safe. It was unknown whether the ancient beast general didn't really intend to pursue Yi Xian or if it couldn't keep up with Yi Xian's movements. In any case, Yi Xian was already far away from the ancient beast general when he retreated 1,000,000 miles away. Yi Xian didn't choose a direction when he ran. Instead, he moved forward at will. However, he was retreating towards the periphery. Unknowingly, Yi Xian was already very close to the yellow sand zone. Yi Xian could already see the edge of the yellow sand zone through his spirit consciousness. At this point, Yi Xian stopped moving forward. What should he do next? Should he choose a new direction and continue to explore the Drought Sea, or should he leave? If he continued to explore the Drought Sea, he might be able to find other opportunities. Without mentioning anything else, just killing ancient beasts and raising his cultivation level was an extremely good choice. However, since Yi Xian's actions had already alarmed one of the ancient beast general, it was very possible that no matter where Yi Xian went, he might encounter other ancient beast generals. Hence, this choice wasn't very good. Bing didn't hesitate for long before he made his choice. He decided to leave the Drought Sea. The core of the Drought Sea might have many unknowns, but Yi Xian didn't want to continue exploring. The danger was secondary. The main reason was that Yi Xian didn't feel that there was a more mysterious inheritance in the Drought Sea than the sword-forging inheritance. Chapter 2489. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios' secret territory of despair? Probably not. Therefore, even if Yi Xian continued to explore the Drought Sea, he would only find some treasures that were not very useful. Since that was the case, why would Yi Xian continue to explore the Drought Sea? After making up his mind, Yi Xian quickly passed through the yellow sand and found the heavenly tiger. "Boss, you're out." Tian, who was pleasantly surprised when he saw Yi Xian. Because of the special nature of the Drought Sea, Tian, who did not support Yi Xian's decision to enter the Drought Sea. After all, Tian, who thought that it was extremely dangerous for Yi Xian to enter the Drought Sea. However, Tian, who was not qualified to stop Yi Xian's decision. Even though Tian, who was the one who told Yi Xian about the Drought Sea, Tian, who was very clear about the dangers of the Drought Sea. Tian, who immediately said when Yi Xian came out, "It's good that you're out. The Drought Sea is too dangerous. If you're interested in finding opportunities, you might as well go to the 12 Despair Secret Lands. After all, there are countless treasures in the 12 Despair Secret Lands and the dangers are relatively lower." Yi Xian didn't feel that there was anything wrong with the trip to the Drought Sea, and he was already very satisfied with the things he obtained. Therefore, Yi Xian didn't care about the dangers of the Drought Sea that Tianhu mentioned. On the other hand, the 12 absolute domains that Tianhu spoke of attracted Yi Xian's attention. 12 Despair Domains? What is that? Boss, the 12 Despair Domains are quite famous in the Demon God domain. Many experts who have reached the Divine Emperor realm choose to go there to find opportunities to break through. The 12 Despair Domains are 12 secret domains. It is said that these 12 secret domains are the cave mansions left behind by the previous experts. Among them, 3 of them were left behind by the Divine Lords. Cave dwellings? Yi Xian frowned slightly. However, Tianhu continued. In our Demon God's domain, many experts have a habit. When they know that they are about to die, they will seal their life savings and inheritances in a secret realm in a special way, waiting for the fated person to open it. Among the 12 absolute domains, 5 inheritances have been discovered, creating many shocking experts. However, there are many other places that have yet to be discovered. Earlier, you said that you were looking for a suitable place, but I didn't think of it. Now, it seems that the secret lands of the 12 Despair Domains might be more suitable for you than the Drought Sea. As long as you can obtain any one of the inheritances, it will be enough to benefit you for life. However, every time the secret lands of the 12 Despair Domains open, it will definitely attract countless experts. A bloody battle is unavoidable, and it may be a little tricky. Was it troublesome? For Yi Xian, this shouldn't be a problem. Yi Xian didn't feel that there was anything wrong with the trip to the Drought Sea. Instead, he felt that he had profited greatly. At this moment, even if Yi Xian didn't obtain anything from the secret lands of the 12 Despair Domains, he wouldn't feel that he had lost anything. Therefore, Yi Xian wanted to see what was so special about the secret lands of the 12 Despair Domains. Alright, let's go to the secret lands of the 12 Despair Domains. You lead the way. Yes, boss. The secret lands of the 12 Despair Domains open every year. Coincidentally, the secret lands of the 12 Despair Domains will open in the middle of next month. We have enough time to go there now. Tianhu seemed to be a little happy. After all, Tianhu didn't dare to go with Yi Xian to the Drought Sea. However, Tianhu dared to enter the secret lands of the Despair Domains. He had even participated in the secret lands of the Despair Domains once before. However, the secret lands of the Despair Domains had already been obtained by others, so the danger level was not very high. Although the secret lands of the Despair Domains were guarded by the experts, the main danger came from the other divine beasts. After all, once a treasure was discovered, it was inevitable that a battle would occur. In Tianhu's heart, he was confident in fighting against the other divine beasts. However, he wasn't confident in facing the ancient beasts in the Drought Sea. Therefore, when Tianhu heard that Yi Xian was willing to go to the secret lands of the Despair Domains, he was so happy. The two of them set off quickly and headed directly to the secret lands of the Despair Domains. However, Yi Xian didn't know that at this moment. In the Demon God Dominion, the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp Tribe was having a meeting. The leader was shockingly the punishment elder of the Heavenly Dragon Drunk Shrimp clan. It turned out that ever since the Sky Tiger tribe had won first place in the intersect competition, The division of resources and authority in the tribe had changed greatly. In the past, the punishment elder had great authority in the tribe and was able to obtain many benefits because his grandson had done well and even surpassed Tian-Hu. So what if Tian-Hu was the Holy Son? If it wasn't for the authority of the Sky Dragon Deity General, he would have been stripped of the title of Holy Son.
In the eyes of the punishment elder, only his grandson was worthy of the title of Holy Son.
In the past, because Tian-Hu's performance was mediocre, and his grandson's performance was incomparably outstanding, the punishment elder did not have any other thoughts. He only wanted to use the power in his hands to obtain more benefits for his grandson, and he did it. It could be said that whatever Holy Son Tian-Hu had, his grandson would definitely have, and what Tian-Hu didn't have, his grandson might have. However, it was different now. He didn't know where Tian-Hu had found such a strong backer, but his strength had suddenly soared and he had won against his grandson in the intersect competition. As a result, the punishment elder felt a strong pressure. He felt that his position was no longer secure, and the authority in his hands was being divided and squeezed by the Sky Deity General and the other elders. How could the punishment elder take this lying down? Therefore, although peace was maintained on the surface, the entire Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe could feel that an internal change was about to begin. The demon god's domain naturally couldn't be so united. The Sky Deity General naturally had his own opponents. The punishment elder's choice was very simple and crude. He chose an old rival of the Sky Dragon Deity General as his backer, and prepared to find a suitable opportunity to unite with the external enemy, overthrow the Sky Dragon Deity General, and take the position of Patriarch himself. It could be said that all the plans were secretly arranged according to his expectations. One by one, the experts of the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe were bribed. If they were not effective, he would find an opportunity to get rid of them. The punishment elder was in charge of the punishment elder. He was the second most powerful figure in the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe. If he wanted to do something, it was simply a simple matter. In a short time, in fact, more than 6 elders of the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe had been killed. On one hand, the punishment elder used the name of investigation to carry out operations. On the other hand, he was thinking of ways to find Yi Xian and Tian-Hu and get rid of them. Chapter 2490. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. Tian-Hu's scheming ways. However, Tian-Hu was leading Yi Xian to the land of despair, so it was inevitable that they would pass by many places, including cities. The news quickly reached the disciplinary elder's ears. Elder, this is what happened. My disciples found the 2 of them there. However, they seemed to be in a hurry, so they only stopped for a short while before continuing on their way. All right, send more people. You must find those 2 fellows for me. I'll arrange people now. This time, we must get rid of those 2 fellows. Yes, Elder. The disciplinary elder's face was full of viciousness as he left. This time, he was determined to get rid of Yi Xian and Tian-Hu. Yi Xian was extremely mysterious. The disciplinary elder had always felt that Yi Xian was not a simple person. However, things were different now. Now that he had the support of another divine general, the disciplinary elder was naturally confident. He felt that he had a good chance of getting rid of Yi Xian and Tian-Hu this time. Even the Heavenly Dragon Divine General didn't know much about the changes in the Heavenly Dragon Drunk Shrimp race, let alone Yi Xian and the Heavenly Tiger. After 2 days of hurrying, they finally arrived at the Land of Despair. Every time the Land of Despair opened, there would inevitably be many people who wanted to try their luck. In many people's minds, as long as they did not enter the core area, they would not be in any danger. It was precisely because of this that many people came with the intention of giving it a try. Of course, there were also some people who came with the intention of obtaining the inheritance. At the moment, only a few dozen holy princes had gathered outside the Land of Despair. There were even more powerhouses. Yi Xian and Tian-Hu were mixed in the crowd, but many people still recognized them. Tian-Hu was considered a special existence among the holy princes. Many people had different rumors about Tian-Hu. However, there was one thing in common. Many holy princes did not care about Tian-Hu's strength at all. In the hearts of many saints, Tian-Hu was a guy who only knew how to use brute force in close combat. He was not a threat at all. Many people even felt that Tian-Hu only knew how to fight with brute force and was not qualified to be a saint. If it weren't for Tian-Hu's father, Tianlong Divine General's powerful battle prowess and influence, these holy sons would have refused to submit. Thus, when Tian-Hu arrived, he immediately heard the sharp and unkind voices. Oh, Isn't this our great heavenly tiger saint son? I didn't expect him to still be alive and kicking. I thought our heavenly dragon saint son had already died. Seems like I was overthinking. I didn't expect our heavenly tiger saint son to still be alive and kicking. Haha, brother, you are wrong to say that about our sky tiger saint child. Are you not afraid that he will go back and tell the great heavenly dragon divine general? At that time, you will have to bear the consequences. That's right, that's right. The sky tiger saint's son is not someone to be trifled with. If you dare to be disrespectful to the sky tiger saint's son, be careful that you will be dealt with. Everyone spoke one after another, but their words were full of ridicule. Obviously, no one really put Tianhu in their eyes. Yi Xian could sense Tianhu's anger. He could tell from his tightly clenched fists that Tianhu was suppressing his anger. However, this time, Yi Xian patted Tianhu's shoulder and used a secret technique to communicate with him. Don't bother with these guys. Just wait and make them stay in the absolute secret realm forever. Yi Xian's words were extremely straightforward. How could the heavenly tiger not understand? Yi Xian wanted Tianhu to start a massacre in the absolute secret realm. There was no need to bother with him now. Tianhu was stunned for a moment before a fierce expression appeared on his face. Tianhu fully agreed with Yi Xian's words. If others wanted to humiliate him, then he would take their lives and make them repent with their deaths. In order to nurture the heavenly tiger, Yi Xian had spared no effort. After all, Yi Xian had already prepared to nurture the heavenly tiger into his loyal servant. Yi Xian didn't need an indecisive follower. What Yi Xian needed was that as long as he gave the order, no matter what kind of enemy it was, the heavenly tiger would dare to charge forward and risk his life. Yi Xian wanted a person who was full of courage and had the courage to fight at any time. Although he wasn't like the divine wood sword attendant or the divine flower sword attendant, who couldn't disobey Yi Xian's orders and didn't give him the slightest discount, a follower like the heavenly tiger was still necessary. After all, there were times when it was inconvenient for Yi Xian to personally handle things, so leaving them to Tian, who was the best choice. Therefore, Yi Xian naturally would not teach Tianhu about morality and benevolence. In a world where the strong were respected, there was no such thing as morality and benevolence. Yi Xian would only make Tianhu even more black-bellied. He would only tell Tianhu that the goal was the root and the means were only means. Of course, this process had to be done slowly. Even if Tianhu could not disobey Yi Xian's orders, Yi Xian still hoped that Tianhu would be willing to work for him. He also wanted Tianhu to be willing to work for him. He also wanted Tianhu to like the tasks he gave him, because this was the only way to achieve the greatest effect. Actually, Yi Xian did not make this arrangement on the spur of the moment. He had already had this idea for a long time. It could be said that when he was in the Jiufeng 60,000 mirrors, Yi Xian had hoped to have such a person by his side. Because, with such a person, many things could be simplified. With the expansion of Yi Xian's influence and strength, Yi Xian could not be said to be alone in the realm of the gods forever. Partner, subordinate, competitor, and enemy. In the future, there would be more and more people like Yi Xian would not be able to do everything according to his own wishes. Even if he could, it would not be good for him to do it himself. Therefore, from that time on, Yi Xian had the idea of grooming such a follower. Tianhu's appearance gave Yi Xian an opportunity. Tianhu's talent did not need to be said. As long as Yi Xian groomed him properly, Tianhu would naturally become one of the strongest. This way, Tianhu would have the ability to complete any task Yi Xian gave him. At this moment, the surrounding people did not know what fate awaited them. They were still scolding Tianhu, mocking him, and even cursing him. If it were in the past, Tianhu would have flown into a rage or run away. But today, Tianhu had a faint smile on his face. He did not seem to care at all. This was because Tianhu was only thinking about the fate of these people. Chapter 2491. Translator. Nyoibo Studio Editor. Nyoibo Studio Kill. Of course, this was also because the secret territory was deliberately left behind by the strong to train the younger generation's geniuses. Those who could participate in this secret realm were all super geniuses of the demon god domain. The majority of them were holy princes. Even if they weren't holy princes, they had similar talents. These people were called quasi-holy princes. Everyone waited in silence. Following a series of clicking sounds, the door finally opened slowly. The door was made of some kind of mysterious material, so it was not impossible to break it open by force. However, This place was guarded by envoys sent by the Divine Master all year round. If someone really tried to do so, they would be killed before they could even take action. Therefore, they could only wait for the door to open before they could enter.
Let's go in too,
Yi Xian said to Tianhu. The two of them walked towards the door. At this time, everyone was thinking about entering the Land of Despair secret territory. Of course, Tianhu was an exception. The closer they got to this moment, the more excited Tianhu became. Although many people were extremely excited at this moment, Yi Xian knew exactly why Tianhu was so excited. When the array was activated, Yi Xian and Tianhu were directly sent into the secret territory. There were many people around them who had entered with them. However, most of them immediately left their original spot and rushed forward. This was not the first time the Land of Despair secret territory had been opened.
Therefore, many people had been here before.
Naturally, many of them had maps left behind by their ancestors. However, there were still people who recklessly ran in front of Tianhu. Haha, Holy Sun Shrimp. I hope you can pick up some trash in the Land of Despair secret territory. Take care. Don't die in there. Tianhu glanced at that person and did not say anything. Instead, he looked at Yi Xian.
Yi Xian lightly nodded his head and only said one word, "Kill."
Yes, boss.
Tianhu moved. Tianhu, who had not said a single word or asked a single question ever since they had arrived at the entrance of the Absolute Domain, suddenly moved.
Boom. It was an absolute suppression, an absolute instant kill. With the Dharma fusion talent and the super mystique that Yi Xian had given him, Tianhu was no longer as weak as before. His first place in the clan's grand competition was not a bluff. He had earned it through real combat.
Therefore, with just one punch, the person who had spoken was already dead.
Tianhu, what are you trying to do? Tianhu's sudden attack startled that person's companions. In their minds, Tianhu was an existence that only bullied the weak. In front of saint children like them, Tianhu never dared to resist. Of course, he also didn't have the strength to defend himself. However, why did Tianhu dare to attack today? He had even killed a holy sun? Although that holy sun's strength wasn't that great, he was still a holy sun.
His status was as noble as theirs. What am I, son?
Actually, I don't want to do anything. I just want to borrow your lives to play with, Tianhu said indifferently.
As he spoke, he was already walking towards the few people.
Yi Xian watched Tianhu's actions silently. Yi Xian was waiting for Tianhu to kill all these people.
It could be said that if Tianhu could not even do this, it would be difficult to nurture him.
Tianhu, how dare you? We are all holy sons. If you kill us, aren't you afraid that the elders of our clan will kill you?
Tianhu, don't think that you can do whatever you want just because your father is Divine General Tianlong. I am equivalent to a holy son and am specially taken care of by the Divine Master. If you act recklessly, the Divine Master will not let you off.
These people were afraid? After all, Tianhu had killed their comrade in one move. This was something that they had never experienced before. In their eyes, Tianhu had always been weak and could be bullied. But now, Tianhu had actually dared to kill his comrade.
This was something that they could not imagine.
What are you talking about? Take him down. How dare he kill us? Take him down first. Someone shouted. The few people immediately got into formation and prepared to fight Tianhu. Tianhu was still a little nervous. After all, he had to face several experts alone.
This was something that he had never experienced before.
However, when Tianhu turned his head and saw Yi Xian standing behind him like a passerby, he was immediately filled with energy.
This was because Tianhu believed that as long as Yi Xian was around, there was nothing that he could not do.
Come at me together so that I won't have to waste my time later, Tianhu said indifferently.
The giant prawn Dharma form behind him had already appeared.
You're courting death.
The few people roared and rushed towards Tianhu at the same time.
Boom, boom, boom. In an instant, the battle was extremely intense. However, Yi Xian was still watching from the side. He did not seem to have any intention of joining in. At this moment, there were not many people around.
Most of them left as soon as they appeared.
This was because compared to the battle between Tianhu and the others, the special inheritance in the absolute secret territory was more attractive. The battle did not last long. Although Tianhu was struggling,
he still defeated the group of people in the end. There were a total of 5 people in the group. However, at this moment, 2 of them had already shut their mouths forever. The remaining 3 people had already knelt on the ground, kowtowing to Tianhu and begging for mercy. They could tell that the current Tianhu was no longer the Tianhu that they could bully. The current Tianhu was not only extremely powerful, but he was also very decisive in his attacks. They were afraid, so they begged for mercy. However, it was already too late for them to beg for mercy. Tianhu did not hesitate. He immediately attacked and killed those people. After doing all this, Tianhu returned to Yi Xian's side. Yi Xian waved his hand and swallowed the corpses of those people. Then, he looked at Tianhu and said, "You should know what to do next, right?" Tianhu nodded and said firmly, "Boss, I understand. As long as they humiliated me, I will not leave a single one of them alive." It's good that you understand. Go, I will wait for your good news." Yi Xian waved his hand. Tianhu bowed slightly to Yi Xian, turned around and chased after them. The direction he left in was the same direction that those people had left in. At this moment, Yi Xian was quite satisfied. It was not only because Tianhu had killed those people as Yi Xian had expected, but also because of Tianhu's performance. Yi Xian had just swallowed the corpses in front of Tianhu. Although it seemed like Yi Xian had just taken the corpses away, it was not clear what Yi Xian had done. Chapter 2492. Translator, Transin Editor. Transin discovering a divine beast. Yi Xian had Tianhu's law fragment with him, so there was a special connection between them. Although the range of the connection was limited, it wasn't too far away. However, at least it was enough to be used in the Land of Despair. Therefore, Yi Xian wasn't worried that Tianhu wouldn't be able to find him. Yi Xian didn't come to the Land of Despair just to train Tianhu. Since Tianhu had made his move, Yi Xian naturally had to make his move as well. Yi Xian was interested in the so-called inheritance in the Land of Despair. Although he didn't know what kind of inheritance it was better for him to find it himself than others. Therefore, at this moment, Yi Xian also identified a direction and charged forward. Since this absolute domain secret realm was called a test, and it was a test that contained inheritances, then naturally, it couldn't be that peaceful and simple. Yi Xian hadn't gone far when he heard the sound of an intense battle. When Yi Xian walked over to take a look, he saw 5 holy sons besieging a divine beast. The divine beast was surrounded by flames. With every movement it made, the flames would sometimes soar into the sky and sometimes change into different forms. It actually had a certain level of self-consciousness. Yi Xian could see that these movements weren't controlled by the divine beast, but by the flames. Strange. Could it be that the flames of the divine beast are another type of life? Yi Xian was puzzled. At the same time he said to the system, "System, detect this divine beast. I want to see what's so special about it." Ding. System notification. Target set. Dark Fire Nitrogen Flame Beast. First grade lower Ultimate God Realm. Special ability, Spiritual Divine Flame. The Dark Fire Nitrogen Flame Beast and the flames on its body were 2 life forms. However, they shared the same consciousness and shared the same body. Therefore, strictly speaking, it was also a divine beast. Yi Xian was slightly stunned when he saw the description. It was actually a symbiotic divine beast. Yi Xian had heard of symbiotic divine beasts before. Not to mention a 2-body symbiosis. Even a 3-body or 4-body symbiosis was not impossible. However, the symbiotic beasts Yi Xian knew were all the same type of life form. For example, there was a symbiotic beast known as the 2-headed dog. It was also a symbiotic beast with 2 heads. Each head had its own ability to think, but they shared the same body. However, this was Yi Xian's first time seeing a divine beast coexisting with flames. Yi Xian had never seen the spirit god tribe coexisting with a divine beast before. At this moment, the 5 people had surrounded the divine beast and were continuously attacking it. However, he couldn't achieve much in the battle and was even suppressed. After all, symbiotic beasts often had special abilities. Even if they were at the same level, they would be able to gain an advantage, let alone when facing an enemy who was at a lower level. Through the system, Yi Xian found out that there were 5 high-grade celestial emperors surrounding the nitrogen flame beast. 2 of them were peak high-grade god emperors, and because of this, the 5 of them could barely contend against the netherfire nitrogen flame beast. However, if this continued, the 5 of them wouldn't be able to hold on any longer. "Brother over there, Please lend us a hand. We will definitely reward you handsomely after we slay this divine beast. Yi Xian didn't try to hide himself, so he had already been discovered by one of the people present. Yi Xian found this a little funny when he heard this. In Yi Xian's opinion, what was the difference between them and the nitrogen flame beast? Weren't they both divine beasts? The only difference was that the netherfire nitrogen flame beast couldn't take human form. Yi Xian found it strange that a divine beast would refer to its own kind as a divine beast. However, Yi Xian wouldn't lend a helping hand. The 5 sages had nothing to do with Yi Xian. If they were really related, it would be because of the natural hostility between humans and divine beasts. It was already good enough that Yi Xian wasn't taking advantage of the situation to launch a sneak attack on them. How could they expect Yi Xian to lend a helping hand? Yi Xian stood silently to the side. He didn't make a move, but he didn't leave either. He just watched the battle in silence. When the 5 sages saw Yi Xian's reaction, they thought that Yi Xian wanted to take advantage of the situation. Therefore, they immediately shouted at Yi Xian, "Brother, this divine beast isn't a guardian divine beast, and we don't have any treasures to obtain. Please help us slay it. Once we are free, we will definitely reward you handsomely." Help them? Help these 5 sages slay the divine beast before them? That was impossible. To Yi Xian, even if all the sages of the demon god domain died, Yi Xian wouldn't feel the slightest bit of pity. This was because the more sages of the demon god domain died, the better it would be for the Kunlun god domain. As the saying goes, those who walk different paths cannot work together. Moreover, Yi Xian and these guys were even from different races. Why would he care about their life and death? Therefore, Yi Xian continued to watch silently. The battle continued. As time passed, the 5 of them found it harder to resist. Seeing that Yi Xian didn't seem to have any intention of helping, the leader finally shouted, "Retreat!" The 5 of them covered each other and quickly left the battle, fleeing into the distance. If it was really as they said, that the divine beast wasn't a guardian divine beast, then the divine beast would definitely chase after them when they left. However, that wasn't the case. The 5 of them fled, but the divine beast didn't leave its position at all. Yi Xian's mouth twitched slightly. These guys actually wanted to hide it from Yi Xian. If Yi Xian had just attacked, he would have been treated as a sacrifice and sacrificed for nothing under the divine beast's claws. Not only would he not gain any benefits, he might even be scolded as a fool. What sinister intentions! At this moment, after the 5 of them retreated, they didn't go far. Instead, they looked at Yi Xian from afar. One of them even scolded Yi Xian like a god. "Brat, we asked you to help us. Why are you delaying?" Yi Xian didn't intend to pay attention to these 5 saints, but when he saw how unreasonable they were, he was still a little angry. "Why should I help you?" Yi Xian replied indifferently. What they didn't know was that Yi Xian's reply meant that he was prepared to attack them. "Humph! We asked you to help us because we thought highly of you. Do you know who we are? How dare you disobey our orders? I think you don't want to live anymore." What a tyrannical saint. They clearly wanted to use Yi Xian and sacrifice Yi Xian to achieve their goals. However, Yi Xian didn't send himself to his death. That was unforgivable in their eyes. However, the one who didn't want to live now wasn't Yi Xian, but them. Yi Xian couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with them. With a wave of his hand, the god slayer in his hand immediately levitated into the air. Chapter 2493. Translator, Nyoibo Studio Editor. Nyoibo Studio Unique Treasure. The god-slaying sword floated in mid-air, constantly emitting a powerful light. That light carried with it a soul-stirring power, causing the holy sun to subconsciously raise his head. However, at this moment, this fellow actually didn't realize that Yi Xian had already intended to kill them. He actually said to Yi Xian in a rather complacent manner, "Not bad, not bad. It's a good sword. Do you mean to use this divine sword as an apology? However, there's only one. How should the 5 of us split it?" Apology? Wasn't this person overconfident? Yi Xian couldn't be bothered to pay attention to him. He casually waved his hand, and in an instant, the god-slaying sword slightly trembled before it covered the entire sky. With a special ability of 1 to 10,000 identical god-slaying swords immediately covered the entire sky. When these divine swords appeared, they immediately fell with a loud bang. Boom, boom, boom. The sudden attack stunned the 5 people. Although not all of them were stupid enough to think that Yi Xian would not attack them, there were 2 peak level 9 divine emperors among them. Therefore, they did not think that Yi Xian would dare to suddenly declare war on them. Unfortunately, Yi Xian didn't act according to their wishes. He didn't even say a single word and attacked as soon as he said so. Damn it! Someone cursed. At the same time, the light of the Law of Tao lit up in an attempt to block the god-slaying sword's attack. The attacks rained down like rain. Each one of them was as powerful as the god-slaying sword itself. The god-slaying sword had been upgraded twice, and it had improved immensely. Even if it was just a sneak attack from the sword shadow, it was still extremely powerful. Boom! The shield of the weakest chosen saint was broken. In an instant, at least 100 god-slaying sword clones attacked him. Poof poof. The sound of swords piercing into bodies was heard continuously. In just one move, one of the 5 people died on the spot. The other 4 people's expressions changed drastically. Of course, they had used their divine thoughts to check Yi Xian's cultivation level. However, they could only see that he was a divine emperor. That was why they dared to be so arrogant. In their hearts, even if Yi Xian was at the peak of the 9th grade divine emperor realm, it would be impossible for him to win against 2 holy sons who were also at the peak of the 9th grade divine emperor realm. Or rather, he had no chance of winning at all. However, they did not know that Yi Xian was a peak level 9 divine emperor and had a permanent honorable title. In addition to that, there was a chance that Yi Xian would not be able to deal with them, even level 9 divine emperors. Kill Yi Xian. With all his tricks. At this moment, Yi Xian's sudden outburst of strength had greatly exceeded the expectations of the 5 of them. They'd underestimated Yi Xian and overestimated themselves. That was why they'd ended up in such a state. If they hadn't underestimated Yi Xian, if they had been able to maintain their vigilance, then they wouldn't have been completely suppressed by the god-slaying sword's 10,000 transformations. Who are you? The leader dared not underestimate Yi Xian. Light flashed beside him, but he did not attack immediately. Instead, he questioned Yi Xian. The peak of the divine emperor realm was one of the best among the holy sons. It could be said that if there was a ranking list of the holy sons' strength, these 2 people could be ranked in the top 100. Except for some saints who had never been seen before, these 2 people had more or less seen or heard of the rest of the saints. However, they had never heard of Yi Xian. What if Yi Xian was not a saint? With Yi Xian's age and his strength, it was impossible for him to explain it. That was why the leader had asked such a question. While this person was asking, Yi Xian suddenly sensed that the divine beast was a little anxious. Yi Xian and the others were clearly fighting in front of this divine beast. However, this divine beast did not seem to have any intention of backing down. It remained in its original position. Combined with the divine beast's sudden anxiety, Yi Xian thought that something must have happened to the thing this divine beast was guarding. Compared to the unique treasure guarded by the divine flame beast, these shengzens weren't that important. So at this moment, Yi Xian directly said to the leader, "You guys can leave. If it wasn't for your mouth being too smelly, I wouldn't have attacked you guys. So if you leave now, I can let bygones be bygones. Otherwise, you should understand the consequences." Yi Xian waved his hand as he spoke. The sword-forging beast, the divine wood sword servants, and the divine flower sword servants appeared at the same time. At this moment, other than the leader, no one else dared to challenge Yi Xian. They could clearly see that if Yi Xian wanted to kill any one of them, he could do it. The leader hesitated for a moment before nodding. "All right, let's go." With that, the 4 of them immediately fled into the distance. Yi Xian did not have the time to care whether they really left or not. Yi Xian ordered the divine flower sword servants and the sword-forging beast to stand guard in the surroundings while he led the divine wood sword servants and walked towards the divine beast. When the divine beast saw Yi Xian coming over, it kept roaring furiously, as if warning Yi Xian not to go over. Otherwise, it would not be polite. Yi Xian did not care about it at all. However, the rare treasure had yet to be born, so Yi Xian did not want to cause trouble. Therefore, he just stood aside and waited silently. This wait did not last long. In less than 3 hours, the ground under the divine beast's feet suddenly shook violently. Clearly, the rare treasure had been born. For a moment, the sky was filled with colorful clouds, and the ground was overflowing with light. What exactly was it? This was the absolute mystic realm, the land of inheritance left behind by the powerhouses of the demon god realm. Could it be the birth of an inheritance? However, if it was, there should not be such a huge commotion. Or could it be a super rare treasure left behind by a fallen powerhouse of the demon god realm? Yi Xian waited silently for the results to be revealed. The ground was still shaking, and the shaking was getting more and more intense. After 30 minutes, a huge change finally happened under the divine beast's feet. Boom, boom, boom. Countless flames soared into the sky. It was magma from underground. Magma was actually spraying out. What kind of rare treasure would be hidden in the magma? Yi Xian released his divine perception and carefully investigated. However, this magma was not as ordinary as it looked on the surface. It had actually been refined by someone. Not only was it powerful, but it also had the ability to block divine perception. In just a moment, the entire ground had completely changed. Countless magma spewed out from underground, turning this place into a lake of magma. At this moment, a golden light finally emerged from the bottom of the lake. It was an extremely strange thing. It looked like a claw, but it did not look like one. Chapter 2494. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios snatched the treasure. Roar. The divine flame beast's roar was filled with joy. It had finally arrived. He had been waiting here for 10,000 years. He had not left this place at all. He had been waiting for the appearance of the claw. Today, the rare treasure had finally appeared. Unfortunately, there was another person beside him who had taken a liking to it as well. To Yi Xian, since the rare treasure was a good item, Yi Xian would not let it go. Kill. Yi Xian waved his hand. The divine wood sword servants charged forward without hesitation. At the same time, Wei Zhentian controlled the god-slaying sword to attack first. Yi Xian waved the Rule Divine bow in his hand and shot out Rule Divine arrows. Absolute Zero. Eternal Night Field. Apart from the Eternal Field and Dharma power, Yi Xian had unleashed his full strength. At this moment, there was only the divine flame beast, so Yi Xian did not have to use all his trump cards. However, Yi Xian had underestimated the shamelessness of the four people. It turned out that after the four people left, they were still thinking about the rare treasure. They did not care about the death of their companions because they did not care at all. They only cared about the rare treasure. In order to obtain the rare treasure, they immediately called their friends the moment they left and told everyone that a rare treasure had appeared. In addition, the appearance of the rare treasure had caused a change in heaven and earth, which attracted more than 10 people. Therefore, when Yi Xian was fighting the divine flame beast, more than 30 people had surrounded them. However, among these people, there was one person that Yi Xian did not expect. Tian, who was also in this group of people. At this moment, Tian, who also saw Yi Xian. His expression changed slightly, but he immediately said to the people around him with a smile, "Everyone, since we are here, the rare treasure is naturally ours. Let's go and snatch it." Tian Hu, come back. Let the others make the first move. What are we waiting for? If we wait for the others to make the first move, will we still have a share? Tian Hu purposely let out a loud roar before charging towards Yi Xian. With a thought, Yi Xian understood Tian Hu's intentions. Tian Hu wanted to use others to kill the mythical beast and preserve his strength. After understanding Sky Tiger's intentions, Yi Xian also rushed towards Sky Tiger. The two of them fought fiercely in mid-air, but it was just an act. When the others saw the opportunity, they immediately rushed toward the divine flame beast. "Boss, what's that?" Tian Hu threw a punch at Yi Xian and asked through voice transmission. "I haven't figured it out yet, but it should be useful for you," Yi Xian said as he kicked Flying Tiger. "Boss, are you saying that you've given that thing to us?" Tian Hu crawled up and roared as he continued to charge towards Yi Xian. "It's useless to me. It's a claw. I don't like using this thing." Claws? Could it be God Lord Qi Yu's 3 lives 3 destruction claw? Tian Hu was extremely excited, but he made a mistake and his face collided with Yi Xian's fist. Tian Hu quickly looked around and heaved a sigh of relief when he realized that no one was paying attention to them. "Why? Do you think that your face is harder than my fist?" Yi Xian smiled. He knew that Tian Hu was excited. The 3 lives 3 destruction claw was obviously a supreme treasure in the demon god domain. Yi Xian casually gave it to Tian Hu, so Tian Hu was naturally excited. Cough cough. "Boss, why don't we snatch it now? I can't wait any longer." Tianhu couldn't wait any longer. The 3 Lives 3 Destruction Claw was the supreme treasure that made the demon god domain's divine lord famous. Moreover, it was said that this treasure was refined by an existence stronger than the divine lord. How could he not be excited? Looking at the divine flame beast and those saints who were crazily killing each other, one could understand how deadly the temptation of this item was in the demon god domain. Since that's the case, stand aside. Yi Xian didn't want to waste any more time. At this moment, Yi Xian was ready to use the eternal territory. There were more than 30 enemies here, including a divine flame beast. Without using the eternal territory, Yi Xian wasn't confident that he could intimidate them. When Tianhu heard Yi Xian's words, he was slightly stunned. He still didn't understand Yi Xian's intention. In Tianhu's heart, Yi Xian's strength had always been a mystery. Because neither Tianhu nor Tianlong Divine General had tested Yi Xian's strength, they still didn't know what Yi Xian's cultivation level was. However, since Yi Xian asked him to stand aside, Tianhu had no choice but to stand aside obediently. Yi Xian's figure flashed as he directly descended from the sky and joined the battle. Humph, it's this guy. I thought he had given up. I didn't expect him to be so reckless and still dare to come. Kid, since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. At this moment, a holy sun rushed up and blocked Yi Xian's path. The battle below wasn't actually a one-on-one battle. Instead, it was divided into 3 groups. At this moment, seeing Yi Xian charge over, there were naturally people who tried to stop him. Yi Xian ignored that person. The Eternal Territory was Yi Xian's greatest trump card. However, he had only used it once since he obtained it. And today, Yi Xian was going to use it for the second time. Eternal Territory. Yi Xian waved his hand and activated the Eternal Territory. In the battle below, it wasn't that no one had activated their domains. However, once the Eternal Territory was activated, no power could stop it. With Yi Xian as the center, a powerful force spread out and enveloped more than half of the people. Of course, this included the Flaming Beast and the 3 Births 3 Destruction Claws. The strangest thing was that when the Eternal Territory was activated, it actually repelled and even wiped out the power of other domains within its range. Whether it was in terms of power or range, the Eternal Territory was too domineering. Of course, perhaps it was because these holy sons did not fully activate their domains when they were fighting. However, even so, the dominance of the Eternal Territory was beyond everyone's expectations. What are you trying to do? Don't tell me you want to challenge all of us by yourself? Seeing Yi Xian's actions, a holy son roared angrily. After all, Yi Xian had used the power of his domain to suddenly envelop all of them. Naturally, it would arouse suspicion. Unfortunately, there was no need for them to suspect anything. Yi Xian had already launched an attack. Godslayer kill. Following Yi Xian's command, the Godslayer immediately turned into thousands of swords. Like rain, streaks of sword light fell from the sky. Page. At this moment, these powerful saints were shocked to find that they couldn't resist at all. No, what kind of power is this? This is impossible. Chapter 2495. Translator, Nyoibo Studio Editor. Nyoibo Studio 3 Births 3 Deaths Claw. Another few rays of sword light fell on the holy son who had his arm cut off. His godhead was shattered. The same scene was playing out in several other places at the same time, including the divine beast of fire. Powerful and invincible. It seemed that no one could find the words to describe Yi Xian at this moment. He was too powerful, so powerful that it was hard for them to accept. This was the first time Tianhu had seen Yi Xian's power. At this moment, his legs were trembling. Who could fight against such terrifying power? He had killed more than 20 people at the same time, and there was no lack of superior grade 9 divine emperors among them. This kind of power was simply unimaginable and hard to accept. Get lost! Yi Xian shouted. The remaining people did not dare to hesitate and retreated in panic. What else did these holy sons want to do? Yi Xian had shown that he could kill them easily. If they did not leave now, they would not have the chance to leave. Yi Xian looked at the result of his actions with satisfaction. Yi Xian's soldiers did not chase after the holy sons who had left. After all, Yi Xian was invincible in the eternal domain. However, once they left the eternal domain, Yi Xian might not be able to do anything to them. Tianhu, go and take your claw. Yi Xian said casually. Tianhu's body shook violently, but he immediately went over. At this moment, the surrounding people were envious. At the same time, they were wondering what kind of relationship Tian-Hu had with this mysterious expert. This was the 3 births 3 deaths claw. This was a super divine weapon used by divine masters, but this person had casually given it to Tian-Hu. The 3 births 3 deaths claw was the most powerful magical weapon of the previous divine master. This magical weapon was extremely powerful, and the most important thing was its special ability, the 3 births 3 deaths. It was said that this magical weapon could even preserve a strand of the owner's soul and godhead. In battle, even if the owner died, he could use this strand of soul and godhead to revive himself. At the same time, the 3 births 3 deaths was a strange fusion of the laws of time and space. Once it was displayed, it would be an extremely terrifying illusion. If there was a special magic treasure that could break it, it would be fine. However, if it couldn't be broken, what awaited the enemy would be the illusion of 3 reincarnations. Not to mention how many years he had been trapped in the illusionary realm. Just the fact that his strength had been greatly reduced after he came out was enough to make him suffer. This 3 births, 3 perishes illusion was somewhat similar to a seal. It was such a powerful rare treasure. The only pity was that Yi Xian couldn't use it. Although the Demon God Domain and Kunlun God Domain both cultivated the power of laws, and both used divine force as the foundation for their cultivation, there was still a huge difference in body structure and other aspects. Therefore, most of the treasures created by the Demon God's domain were difficult for humans to wield. If one tried to wield them forcefully, not only would the power of the treasures be greatly reduced, it would also cause the treasures to backfire. Similarly, it would be extremely difficult for the experts of the Demon God realm to wield the treasures of the humans of the Kunlun God realm. Therefore, even if Yi Xian obtained the 3 births, 3 perishes claw, he could only use it to devour. It was more practical to give it to Tian-Hu. Increasing Tian-Hu's strength wasn't a bad thing for Yi Xian. Tian-Hu quickly kept the 3 births, 3 perishes claw in his hands and played with it fondly. Yi Xian had given Tian-Hu something 3 times, and all 3 times, it could be said that Tian-Hu couldn't resist the temptation. Tian-Hu was extremely excited. At the same time, he was extremely grateful to Yi Xian. "Thank you, boss." After half a day, Tian-Hu could only squeeze out this sentence. Because he was too excited, he couldn't say much. With the rare treasure in his hands, Yi Xian naturally wouldn't stay any longer. He brought Tian-Hu and left. The surrounding Shangs of the Demon God domain watched as Yi Xian took the 3 births, 3 perishes claw and gave it to Tian-Hu. Other than feeling envious, there was nothing they could do. After all, Yi Xian's strength had already exceeded their expectations. He could fight more than 20 people alone. He could even kill them in an instant. What kind of power was this? How terrifying was this power? Who was he? In an instant, rumors about Yi Xian's identity began to circulate. The appearance of the 3 births, 3 perishes claw was already a huge piece of news. Along with this news, there were even more speculations about Yi Xian's identity. After all, Yi Xian's youth was obvious to all. Furthermore, his strength was incomparably strong. Some people said that Yi Xian was a reclusive Shangs. Others said that Yi Xian was a super existence secretly nurtured by a large clan. What made people not know whether to laugh or cry was that some people suspected that Yi Xian was the 9-path Shangs. They actually suspected that Yi Xian was Luo Luo. Yi Xian and Tian-Hu didn't continue to stay in this desolate area for too long. This was because Yi Xian knew that with such a precious treasure in hand, it was inevitable that others would try to steal it. And if Yi Xian didn't leave quickly, there might be endless troubles. After all, there were many people who would risk their lives for the 3 births, 3 perishes claw. Even some of the older generation experts would take action. Tian-Hu had already cultivated the 3 births, 3 perishes claw and was extremely excited. However, before the two of them could decide on their next destination, Tian-Hu received a piece of news. After reading the news, Tian-Hu frowned. His expression was filled with anger. "What's wrong, Tian-Hu?" Yi Xian asked Tian-Hu. Tian-Hu didn't hide anything and said directly, "Boss, there's news from within the clan. The head of law enforcement has colluded with other clans and started a rebellion. He has already sent experts to kill us. As for the clan, it's already a mess." The Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp's tribe had an internal rebellion? Yi Xian frowned slightly. This matter wasn't directly related to Yi Xian. However, it wasn't completely unrelated. Each of the 8 deity generals had a secret passage that led to the Master God battlefield. From there, they could return to the Kunlun God domain. If Yi Xian could use this opportunity to leave, it would undoubtedly be a good thing. Besides that, through Tianlong Deity General, perhaps Yi Xian could obtain more information about Luo Luo's whereabouts.
Then let's return to your clan.
Boss, you mean that you're willing to help me? Tianhu was extremely excited. In Tianhu's heart, Yi Xian was omnipotent. It could be said that Tianhu's current achievements were all thanks to Yi Xian. It was Yi Xian who gave him the ancient resources, the ancient mystique, and the powerful 3 births, 3 parishes claw. Without Yi Xian, the heavenly tiger probably wouldn't even be ranked among the holy sons. Other than borrowing his father's name, Tianhu was nothing. It was Yi Xian who gave Tianhu all of this. Therefore, Tianhu always felt that there was nothing that could stop Yi Xian. Yes, I'll go back with you. Yi Xian nodded and replied. The two of them didn't delay and set off immediately. At first, the journey was rather peaceful. Chapter 2496. Ambush. In order to not be recognized by the people chasing after them, Tianhu and Yi Xian had disguised themselves. Yi Xian had even specially refined a divine talisman that could change one's aura and carry it with him. Unfortunately, even so, it was still discovered. Since Yi Xian and Tianhu could think of using a divine talisman to hide themselves, how could the people chasing after them not think of the same thing? Therefore, as soon as Yi Xian and Tianhu entered the territory of the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe, they were immediately surrounded. Young master, you're back. I'll bring you to see the patriarch and the other elders now. The tribe has fallen out. A Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe member came to Tianhu's side and said to him. At the beginning, neither Tianhu nor Yi Xian noticed anything unusual. They thought that this person was really here to pick up Tianhu, so they didn't hesitate to follow him and directly followed him forward. But after walking for a while, Tianhu found something strange. No, this isn't the direction of the tribe's discussion hall. Where are you taking me? Young master, you don't know. The main hall is in chaos now. A few elders want to betray the patriarch for some reason, so the patriarch temporarily retreated to Elder Jui's side. That person's words seemed to be reasonable, but if Tianhu didn't know that it was the disciplinary elder who betrayed them, he would have believed him. This Elder Jui was in cahoots with the disciplinary elder, and he was a trusted aide. At this moment, this guy was trying to bring Tianhu and Yi Xian to Elder Jui's side. He was undoubtedly trying to lure Tianhu and Yi Xian into a trap. Damn it, you're with the disciplinary elder. Go to hell. Once he figured this out, Tianhu did not hesitate at all. He immediately used his killing move. Young master, don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. If you force us to attack, I'm afraid you won't have it easy. Tianhu didn't expect that person to be an expert. Although Tianhu's all-out attack repelled him, it didn't kill him. Humph, damn guy. Since you've become a traitor, don't think of leaving here alive. Today, I don't care which branch you're from, I'll kill you with my own hands. Tianhu was furious. After all, if anyone knew that their family was in chaos, they wouldn't have a good time. He was already holding the 3 births 3 destruction claws in his hand. The current Tianhu was no longer the saint who could be bullied by anyone. He was no longer the saint who only knew how to fight in close combat. The current Tianhu now, with Yi Xian's support, he was no longer who was Yi. Die for me! Tianhu suddenly roared as he swung to kill him. As he swung his arm, the powerful Dharma. Boom! With a loud bang, the assassin was sent flying. Tianhu didn't intend to let him off so easily. He waved his hand and a powerful force spread out. With a thunderous sound, that person was once again sent flying. He didn't die. Yi was to be killed, as Tian was to be. In the end, Tianhu's cultivation level was still too low. Even if Tianhu allowed the enemy to attack him, he couldn't break through his defense. Capture him. That person stood up as if he wasn't attacked at all. He immediately gave the order to capture Yi Xian and Tianhu. Following his order, hundreds of Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp Tribe clansmen rushed out in an instant. Young master, we only wanted to invite you to Elder Jui's side. However, since you don't know what's good for you, don't blame us for being ruthless. Kill. Charge, kill. Capture the Sky Dragon Saint and the disciplinary elder will reward you handsomely. The assailants didn't hesitate as they charged at Tian-Hu. They didn't even bother to call him young master. Now, they had completely betrayed him. Tian-Hu was furious. Unfortunately, with his limited strength, he couldn't do anything to those people. At this moment, Tian-Hu could only place his hopes on Yi Xian. Yi Xian lightly raised his hand and indifferently said to Tian-Hu, "I'll kill these people." "Boss, don't let them die so easily. These damn traitors, we must let them taste pain before they die." Tian-Hu didn't plead for mercy for his tribesmen. Instead, he asked Yi Xian not to kill them all in one go. He wanted to torture them until they were dead. Of course, the Heavenly Tiger was only joking. Whether it was the Heavenly Tiger or Yi Xian, they both knew that in this situation, the most important thing was to quickly kill these enemies that were blocking the way and reach the main hall. Since the disciplinary elder dared to start a rebellion, it was obvious that he was prepared. It could be said that no one knew what was going on in the main hall. "Wei Zhentian, attack!" Yi Xian ordered. Of course, when Yi Xian ordered Wei Zhentian to attack, it was the same as ordering the god-slaying sword to attack. After all, Wei Zhentian could control the god-slaying sword at the same time. One becomes 10,000. Once again, the god-slaying sword launched a powerful attack. In the sky, streaks of sword light could be said to have covered the sun. However, these incomparably powerful sword lights automatically locked onto those assassins. Boom, boom, boom. The continuous sound of explosions indicated that a portion of the assassins had died. Under Wei Zhentian's concentrated attack, the weaker assassins could only be killed. Suddenly, Yi Xian's figure moved and he actually charged forward. Divine Rule Arrow. As Yi Xian charged forward, he pulled the string of his Divine Rule Arrow. Streaks of incomparably powerful Divine Rule Arrow followed by the god-slaying sword lights fell continuously. In the blink of an eye, the entire area was filled with flashes of light and the sound of explosions rang out incessantly. "I'll let you have a taste of this move." Suddenly, Yi Xian waved his hand and the god-slaying sword returned to Yi Xian's hand. God-slaying slash. 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 Boom. An enemy was sent flying and turned into a rain of blood in mid-air. Then, another enemy was struck by Yi Xian's sword. There was a treasure in front of him that tried to block, but Yi Xian slashed the treasure in front of him in half. "Die, all of you!" Yi Xian waved his hand and a crescent-shaped sword light flew out. Two enemies were cut in half at the waist, but the sword light did not weaken. It directly hit a mountain in the distance. That mountain could be considered to have suffered an unexpected calamity. It was actually cut in half. Rumble. The collapse of the mountain did not affect the battle here. God-slaying slash. Slash again. Boom. Yi Xian slashed out with his sword again. The berserk power didn't even give the enemy time to react. He was already dead on the spot. Yi Xian's frenzied attack was so powerful that the enemy did not even have time to react. Go! Chapter 2497. The traitor's sorrow. Of course, the assassins did not dare to continue their pursuit. They did not have the ability to do so. Not only did Yi Xian's berserk attack kill more than half of the assassins, the rest of the people were also injured. Yi Xian's strength was not something these people could stop. If it was not for Yi Xian and Tian-Hu rushing to the main hall, none of these enemies would have survived. Yi Xian and Tian-Hu were extremely fast. Along the way, they encountered two enemies blocking their way. However, no matter what kind of enemy they were, Yi Xian would not show them any mercy. Even if these people were Tian-Hu's clansmen, Tian-Hu would not treat them as his clansmen since they had betrayed him. At the same time, Tianlong Divine General was struggling to hold on in the main hall of the Tianlong Drunk Shrimp clan. The enemy was also a Divine General. Logically speaking, as a Divine General, that person should not have the guts to attack Tianlong Divine General. After all, they were the right-hand men of the Demon Divine Domain's Divine Lord. Once the Demon Divine Domain's Divine Lord knew about this, he would definitely stop them. However, these people came prepared. At this moment, the main hall was surrounded by a huge barrier. It was a strange seal. Because of the seal's power, Tianlong Divine General was unable to send a message out. Trapped together with Tianlong Divine General were some elders who were loyal to Tianlong Divine General. As for the ordinary clansmen, they were not affected as they did not know what was going on. Only a portion of the clansmen who had been grooming the punishment elder followed him and betrayed him. Tianlong, you still don't want to admit defeat? An expert looked at Tianlong with a murderous look on his face. He and Tianlong were both upper-level hierarch experts. Their strength was on par with each other. Under normal circumstances, if they were to fight, the chances of victory would be 50-50. However, the punishment elder was prepared. He bribed one of the clansmen who was in charge of taking care of Tianlong Divine General and released a poisonous fog when Tianlong Divine General was resting. The poisonous fog was extremely poisonous. Although it did not take Tianlong Divine General's life, it greatly reduced his strength. That was why that person was given a chance. Of course, Tianlong Divine General was fighting with his life on the line. If Tianlong Divine General was really desperate, that person would have to pay a great price even if he could kill Tianlong Divine General. Even if he did not die, he would still be severely injured. That person floated in midair. Not a single inch of land remained intact under their feet. If it weren't for the restrictions in the air that shielded them from the battle, which was also a huge seal that limited the shockwaves of the battle to this area, the battle between the two of them would have caused even more destruction. Seeing the Sky Deity General spitting out blood again, one of the clansmen who was loyal to the Sky Dragon Deity General shouted in horror. Then he said to the people around him, "Can we still fight?" After he finished speaking, he prepared to make a move. Tianlong Divine General endured the pain. Of course, he knew that with these people guarding him, there was a chance for him to escape. However, he could not and did not dare to do so. This seal was actually the last shred of face of that Divine General. If Tianlong Divine General rushed out now, that person would definitely give the order to slaughter the entire Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimps tribe. Because only by slaughtering the entire Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimps tribe, Tianlong would not be valued by the Divine Lord and he would be able to keep his position. It could be said that Tianlong did not have any other choice. If he rushed out, he could survive, but his clansmen would definitely be buried with him, including the punishment elder who betrayed him. Staying here, as time passed, the poison would get worse and Tianlong Divine General would definitely die. Tianlong Divine General looked at the punishment elder silently. He was unwilling to accept this. He had killed countless enemies and encountered countless dangers in his life. But in the end, he still died in the hands of his own clansmen. Being betrayed by one's own clansman to one's old enemy, this feeling was really uncomfortable. Tianlong, do you still want to hold on? You should know what kind of poison you are suffering from. This is the king of poison that I have paid a huge price to get from the hopeless abyss. There is no antidote in this world. Even if you use your divine power to suppress it, it will only delay the time. Die if you die, I can still spare the lives of your clansmen. There were many experts around that Divine General. At this moment, those people looked at Tianlong Divine General and laughed. As for the punishment elder, he was already regretting it. Until this time, he finally understood that he was still a clansman of the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimps tribe. No matter how good the words of outsiders were, no matter how many benefits they gave him, they were just using him. In truth, from the moment the disciplinary elder let this Divine General and his people in and laid down a seal, no one dared to look at him. At the beginning, they said that they would support him to become the new patriarch and give him countless benefits, but that was a lie. Their real purpose was to kill Tianlong Divine General. Without Tianlong Divine General, the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimps tribe was nothing. Their final fate was only to be enslaved. Unfortunately, it was too late to regret now. This punishment elder had long been an outsider. His own clansmen despised him, and even those elders who supported him at the beginning had already distanced themselves from him at this moment. Because no one was a fool, everyone could see it clearly. Internal strife for power may be supported by some people, but colluding with outsiders was unacceptable. What's more, colluding with the mortal enemy of the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimps tribe. The enemy did not even give you a chance to live, let alone anything else. At this moment, except for some clansmen, no one followed the punishment elder. Everyone stayed away from him. His clansmen despised him, and the outsiders who had treated him as a guest did not even look at him. Unfortunately, all of this was the punishment elder's own fault. Whether he could survive or not depended on what the patriarch, who he had always been against, did. If the patriarch died, even if they survived, they would only become slaves. If the patriarch was alive, they could also live, but what awaited him was the punishment of the tribe. Everything was self-inflicted. At this moment, the punishment elder had already lost all his ambitions. What he wanted in his heart was to be free as soon as possible. Suddenly, Tianlong Divine General's mind moved. He actually sensed that two figures were quickly approaching in this direction. If Tianlong Divine General could sense it, then the enemy naturally could also sense it. Chapter 2498. Translator, Transin Editor. Transin Divine General Lin. At this moment, Divine General Tianlong was powerless to resist. Divine General Tianlong prayed in his heart that Tianhu would not come. Unfortunately, Tianhu came in the end. I didn't expect that this little guy would come to me today. What a good show of father-son affection, haha. The man laughed wildly. Tianhu's arrival gave him a chance to win. A chance to kill Divine General Tianlong. As for Yi Xian, who came with Tianhu, he did not even bother to look at him. Perhaps the cultivation of a superior 9th-grade Divine Emperor was not bad, but in this man's eyes, it was nothing to be afraid of. Go, catch that little guy for me. The enemy waved his hand, and an expert came out, immediately pouncing on Tianhu and Yi Xian. How dare you? Tianlong Deity General roared. Despite the injuries on his body, he directly rushed toward that person. At this moment, Tianhu and Yi Xian could see the battlefield in front of them. But when Tianhu was about to enter the restrictive shield, he was stopped by Yi Xian. Wait a minute, there's a restrictive shield here. Boss, my father is fighting with the enemy. I want to go in, don't stop me. What can you do if you go in? Even your father can't deal with the enemy. What can you do? Stay here and protect me. I want to break this restrictive shield. Although Yi Xian did not know what the restrictive shield was, Yi Xian knew that no matter what the restrictive shield was, since the enemy set it here, it must be disadvantageous to them. At this moment, Yi Xian came back with Tianhu, which meant that he was helping the Divine General Tianlong Drunk Shrimp Tribe. System, analyze this restrictive shield. I need to break this restrictive shield. Yi Xian directly ordered the system. However, at this moment, someone was already rushing towards them. Yi Xian casually waved his hand, and the God-slaying sword and the Divine Wood Sword attendants immediately charged out, while the sword-forging beast guarded Yi Xian's side. Yi Xian did not need the God-slaying sword to block for him for too long. He only needed a moment. With the help of the system, Yi Xian did not need much time to break through this restriction. In the beginning, no one took Yi Xian's actions seriously. After all, this was a restriction set up by one of the 8 great divine generals. Naturally, it couldn't be broken by just anyone. However, in less than half a cup of tea's time, the enemy panicked. This was because they could clearly see that Yi Xian was beginning to break the seal. Furthermore, they could clearly sense that the power of the seal was weakening. Damn it! Quick, go! Kill that guy for me! Don't let him break the seal! A voice rang out. Tianhu abruptly raised his head. Uncle Supreme Scale, it's actually you. Supreme Scale Divine General. The expert who attacked Tianlong Divine General was actually Supreme Scale Divine General, who had always been on good terms with the Dragonmouth Lobster Tribe. Tianhu had even been betrothed to Supreme Scale Divine General's daughter since they were young. Once the time was right, the two families would become relatives by marriage. Tianhu's eyes widened. He was unwilling to believe that the person who attacked his father was actually the uncle he had respected since he was young. Tianhu naturally did not know about the grudges of the older generation. It turned out that Tianlong Divine General and Supreme Scale Divine General had become enemies because of a woman when they were young. Both of them had wanted to kill each other, but neither had succeeded. Instead, as their strength increased, they were noticed by the current generation's Divine Master, and the enmity between them was resolved on the surface. However, the seed of enmity had always been planted in their hearts. The so-called children by marriage had never been seen by the Divine Master, and the two of them had never truly reconciled in private. Even though thousands of years had passed, the two of them still viewed each other as mortal enemies who had to be killed. Hence, today's scene was born. Tianhu stared blankly at the scene, completely losing his ability to judge. However, Yi Xian did not care so much. When he saw the expert beside Supreme Scale Divine General rushing over, Yi Xian immediately ordered the Divine Wood Swordsman to hold on no matter what, and even let the sword-forging beast join in the battle. At this moment, Yi Xian was at the critical moment of breaking the restriction. He only needed a little more time to break this restriction. From Yi Xian's hands, rays of light directly poured into the restriction. Yi Xian himself was a restriction grandmaster, and at this moment, he used an extremely violent method. Restriction reversal. This was an extremely dangerous method to break the restriction. It could be said that if one did not understand the restriction well enough and used it rashly, the final result would be a backlash from the restriction, and one's body would explode and die. However, Yi Xian did not have such worries. To Yi Xian, the system was his greatest reliance. As long as the system was there, no matter what kind of restriction it was, Yi Xian would be able to break it. The system gave the method to break the restriction in detail. To Yi Xian, he only needed to follow the system's instructions and there was no danger at all. The originally incomparably sturdy restriction that could even block the aftershocks of the battle between the two divine sovereigns seemed to be so insignificant in front of Yi Xian. Following the rays of light in Yi Xian's hands, the restriction actually trembled as if it would collapse at any moment. This was the effect of the restriction reversal. Using the reversal's power as a guide, the restriction's own power would be used to destroy the restriction. This kind of destruction could not be stopped no matter what kind of restriction it was. Of course, the prerequisite was that one had to be like Yi Xian and completely understand all the mysteries of the restriction. This was because this was the only way to successfully reverse the restriction. Once the restriction reversal was activated, there was no need to pay attention to it because the internal collapse of the restriction would easily destroy the restriction itself. At this moment, Yi Xian's attention was focused on the people who were charging at him. There were a total of 5 people who were charging at him. One of them was a rank 3 lower ultimate god while the rest were upper-level divine emperors. In other words, there was only one enemy who was really difficult to deal with. Eternal Night Domain. Suddenly, just as the divine wood sword servants and Godslayer were fighting with the enemy, Yi Xian suddenly released the Eternal Night Domain. The Dark General and those people immediately lost consciousness. Of course, this was only an unexpected effect. Once the enemy reacted, it would not be difficult for them to break the Eternal Night Domain. Yi Xian knew this very well. Therefore, Yi Xian did not hesitate and directly launched a series of crazy attacks. Absolute Zero. Yi Xian directly froze the unconscious lower ultimate god expert. Although this could only restrain the enemy for a moment, it was enough. Godslayer, concentrate on killing him. Chapter 2499. Translator, Nyoibo Studio Editor. Nyoibo Studio. Breaking the siege in an instant, the Godslayer in the sky split into 10,000 swords, and all the attacks were concentrated on the low-level ultimate god. At the same time, Yi Xian was not idle. He had already taken out his divine palace of laws. Together with the divine bow of laws, he also attacked with divine talismans. Yi Xian knew very well that he was only relying on the sneak attack at the beginning. It was because the Eternal Night Domain had caught the enemy off guard at the beginning that led to the subsequent series of events. However, if he let his guard down even a little and did not connect the attacks, the enemy would be able to escape. At that time, a bloody battle would be unavoidable. Law of Devouring Arrows. Yi Xian shot 7 Law of Devouring Arrows at the same time. These 7 arrows landed in 7 different positions of the enemy, completely surrounding him. The powerful Law of Devouring Arrows once again controlled the enemy. Then, a divine talisman appeared in Yi Xian's hand. It was the divine talisman of 6 senses. This divine talisman had only one use, and that was to seal off all the enemy's senses for a short period of time. This period of time was very short, but Yi Xian did not expect it to last for too long. All of Yi Xian's attacks and restrictions were actually to create an opportunity for the Godslayer. Yi Xian did not believe that the attacks of 10,000 Godslayers could not kill this guy. One had to know that the Godslayer's attacks had the effect of a critical hit, and there was a chance of a one-hit kill. Yi Xian did not believe that 10,000 Godslayers could not even produce a single critical hit. Of course, because Yi Xian and the Godslayer had attacked the low-level ultimate god expert, the other 4 divine emperors naturally had a chance. At this time, the 4 of them were attacking Yi Xian crazily. The divine wood sword servants and the sword-forging beast were having a hard time blocking them. Although they were barely holding on, they managed to hold on. All of this seemed to take a long time to describe, but in reality, it had only taken a few breaths of time. Divine General Lin only had to think for a moment, and Yi Xian had already turned the situation around. Because the god-slaying sword had finally unleashed 3 consecutive 10-fold critical hits. 10 times the power of a critical hit might not be enough to kill a lower ultimate god expert, but it was enough to break through his defense. Once his defense was breached, the consequences would be unimaginable. That low-level ultimate god expert's fate could be said to be very miserable. He was actually cut into pieces by the God-Slayer. Yi Xian would not mind even if it was just a fragment. After all, it was a third-grade lower ultimate god. No matter what, it was worth devouring for Yi Xian. With a wave of his hand, the corpse disappeared and turned into Yi Xian's experience. Ding! System notification. Host has made a breakthrough to lower rank 2 ultimate god. Just as the system notification sounded, Yi Xian launched a new attack. This was because Yi Xian did not have the time to wait. At this moment, the Divine Wood Sword Servants and the Sword-Forging Beast had reached their limits. The combined attacks of the 4 enemies forced them to retreat. The Sword-Forging Beast's attack style was too simple, while the Divine Wood Sword Servants were also good at defense. Therefore, the 2 of them were forced to block the enemy's attack. They had more than enough defense, but not enough offense. Once Yi Xian was done with the battle, he would naturally send reinforcements immediately. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The 3 consecutive arrows contained 3 powerful divine talisman attacks. In an instant, they stopped the 4 people's attack. Stopping the 4 people's attack was just the beginning. Yi Xian instantly launched infinite teleportation. At the same time, the god-slaying sword was quickly flying back to Yi Xian's side. Just as Yi Xian reached the 4 people, the god-slaying sword also returned to Yi Xian's hand. Go to hell! Yi Xian suddenly swept his sword. The powerful force killed the 4 people in the blink of an eye. After casually swallowing the bodies of the 4 enemies, Yi Xian then focused his attention on the enemy, Supreme Divine General Lin. Everything happened too quickly. They originally thought that Yi Xian would not have the spare energy to attack because he was breaking the seal. However, not only did Yi Xian attack, but he also killed an expert on Supreme Divine General Lin's side. Supreme Divine General Lin and Divine General Tianlong suddenly clashed again, but they immediately retreated. At this time, Divine General Tianlong was unable to launch an attack. Coupled with the change in the seal, he was relieved. It could be said that Supreme Divine General Lin was in a difficult position. Continue to fight? Not to mention whether or not he could kill Divine General Tianlong, the anger of the Divine Master would be enough to make him suffer. One had to know that once the seal was broken, everything that happened here would be easily detected by the outside world. Moreover, Divine General Tianlong could also send the news out. In the past, Supreme Divine General Lin and Divine General Tianlong had shaken hands in front of the Divine Master. But now, once the Divine Master knew, not only would Supreme Divine General Lin not continue to make trouble for Divine General Tianlong, but he would also have to find a way to explain everything. Supreme Divine General Lin looked at the pale Divine General Tianlong, and thought that there was no antidote for the poison in Divine General Tianlong's body. Even if he let him go now, he would not live for long. Even if he could survive, his strength would be greatly reduced, and he would be like a cripple. At this thought, Supreme Divine General Lin waved his hand without hesitation and quickly left with his people. Because he felt that instead of killing Divine General Tianlong, it would be better to let him become a cripple, and then let him suffer to death. At this moment, when Supreme Divine General Lin retreated, Divine General Tianlong could not hold on any longer and directly fell down. Father! Tianhu roared and immediately rushed over. Yi Xian watched all this silently. These things had nothing to do with Yi Xian, but Yi Xian did not leave. Instead, he quietly meditated and rested in the original hall of the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe. The Heavenly Tiger had been very busy these past few days. The matters of the clan, the inquiries from the Divine Lord, the visits from the other clans, and so on made the Heavenly Tiger unable to rest for even a moment. Therefore, the Heavenly Tiger had almost never come to see Yi Xian. Of course, Yi Xian did not mind. For Yi Xian, there was not much difference whether Tianhu came or not. In addition, Yi Xian knew clearly what kind of trouble Tianhu was facing now. When Divine General Tianlong fell, the entire Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe was immediately looked down upon. The Divine Master of the Demon God domain only came once. After seeing the situation of Divine General Tianlong, he turned and left. Not long after, Tianhu received news that Divine General Lin, who was still imprisoned in the Divine Master Palace, was directly released. Obviously, the Divine Master of the Demon God domain gave up on Divine General Tianlong. Subsequently, including the Punishment Elder, there were more than 10,000 people in the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe who were convicted of treason, and hundreds of people were executed for treason. This undoubtedly caused the strength of the Sky Dragon drunk shrimp tribe to be greatly reduced.